What up, though? This is the Roar. What up, though? This is the Roar of the Lions UK podcast, the podcast where six guys from around the British Isles get together to talk about anything and everything Detroit Lions. My name is Anthony Fitzpatrick, and I'm joined by my co-host Ryan McCluskey. And when it's us two in the building, it's all about the college football. Another week has gone by. We are down already to the last two sets of fixtures to come up. This season is going by in a blaze, but as usual, there's been a great amount to talk about this weekend. A lot of great games going off, tons of coaching changes and bits and bobs to go through. Ryan, how did you find this weekend? It was yet another topsy-turvy one, and one of the last four unbeaten teams has fallen. There's not many left now.
Nope, we're down to a nice little cosy threesome of unbeaten teams. It's taking shape nicely. It's battle of the fittest now. Let's see who is able to see it out and get the job done and keep that goose egg on the end of the record. There was even more upsets. There was some huge ones. It's getting towards the end of the season now, so we've got awards lists. I'm going to go through the semi-finalists later. But the Reece Senior Bowl, the first invitees were announced yesterday. So players that are at smaller schools or don't get as much attention this week throughout the season have now been given a chance to get their big TV break coming up at the end of the season. So it's been a fantastic week. Most teams now that are bowl eligible have booked their place. If you aren't going now, then you're probably going to find that you're going to get to the bouncer and your name's not going to be on the list, unfortunately, because the weeks, as you say, are running out. The FCS playoffs are taking shape as well. Their seedings have just begun for their expanded playoffs because they have a much bigger system than the FBS does. So it's heating up and the seasons are coming to an end within 3 weeks. All regular seasons games should have been played and completed for anyone that's behind. We should have our champions of our conferences.
It's absolutely crazy. It seems like a minute ago we were sort of hyping up the season and we were like, oh my God, what's this going to be like? And now there's just 2 weeks, the playoffs, the bowl games, and then we're into draft season. And then we really have a lot of work to get through to show that we've learned some stuff in college this year. And hopefully the Lions might draft a few of the guys we think we're going to. But, it remains to be seen. So as Ryan's already said, we've got a lot on the show today. We're going to go through some news, a lot of coaching changes, going through the rankings again, although there's not been much change in the playoff ones near the top. We're going to take a look at the FCS as well. Ryan's done a little dive on that just to give an update on what's going on in there. And then, of course, we're going to have the reviews from week 11 and we're going to have the preview for week 12, if I've got my weeks right there. It's passing so quick, I can never remember. But I'm going to dive straight on into the news anyhow. And as I say, there's a lot of coaching news this week, and the first one is actually a little bit of, well, not breaking news, but it's just been broken recently that the Michigan State Spartans and their head coach Mel Tucker are working towards a new extension for him there. It's believed to be in the range of about 10 years and $95 million, which would make him the highest paid coach in the Big Ten, the second highest coach in all the FBS behind Nick Saban, I believe, and there would only be 3 NFL coaches earning more than he does. Ryan, obviously, Michigan State, they've had a really good year so far, potential to go into the offseason, maybe into the playoffs, depending what happens. And his recruiting class is looking good for next year, but this is going to be a monster deal, and one that you look at it and you're like, eeh, that might bite them if in a few years this train derails a little bit.
Yeah, unfortunately, the way I see this is it's too much too soon. That is a contract that most people in the industry can't live up to. Now, I don't like to call Michigan State a one-year wonder, but that's frankly currently to date what they are. If you go back for the last maybe 5-10 years, 8-9 wins for them was a pretty good year. Now they're having this breakout playoff year behind Kenneth Walker, who will be gone next year, mind. So the pressure is going to be on whoever has to fill his boots. But I feel like they've had to overpay to keep his services. A lot of people had looked at him as a potential stealing him away at the end of the year. So to tie him down any longer, they've had to throw the real big bucks at him. And I think in the long term, this could be a mistake. Not for Mel Tucker, because now if they want to get rid of him after 3 years, they've probably got to give him a huge boatload in severance pay. He will be very much protected in this deal. They won't have an out in this deal for quite a few years, I imagine. So, but it's good to see hard work rewarded. I just hope that in a few years, if things suddenly go sour, that they don't quickly regret this deal, because colleges don't have that much money. They can't just throw money around 100, 200 million a year. So this is a big commitment to a coach, and hopefully he's going to be here for the long haul. If I had to put a percentage on it of how many coaches would see out a 10-year deal, I bet it's 20, 30% max that actually would get to the end of it.
Yeah, and as me and you were chatting about just before we went on air, I think the level of expectation now is going to be quite high for Michigan State. Obviously, it's been a little bit of a lean period for them recently, but this year they've really outdone themselves expectations-wise. And there's going to be pressure on him, especially now with a 10-year deal, to deliver. And like you say, single win seasons might not be enough now. He might need to be doing double digits most years. And in the Big Ten, that's not an easy proposition, is it?
No, it's not. And you can use Michigan as a direct example. For the last few years, it seems their fans have settled for 9, 10 win years. Harbaugh's been paid. Like, Harbaugh has got money. They've tied him down. It's not as just easy to get rid of him. The expectations there right now are in question. And like I said, good seasons breed good seasons. Like, expectations breed expectations. This team next year is going to be expected to maybe not make the playoffs, but they're expected to make a Big Ten championship. That will be the base minimum now for most years. And that is a very hard thing to live up to, because teams are having down years, like Penn State, but they may bounce back. It's incredibly competitive. You've got likes of Wisconsin. You've got obviously the Wolverines. It's such a hard division to compete in. So they are putting every egg they have in his basket and hoping it doesn't scramble them.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, like you say, 10-year deal is a big thing, Michigan State, but they have the basis for a good team going forward. They've got a good recruiting class coming in. If Mel Tucker carries on getting the sort of recruits he's getting at the minute, could be the potential of something good for themselves. We wish him all the best if this deal does go through. But as you say, it's a deal well earned. He's gone there. He's completely rejuvenated them in a short amount of time. And, he's earning his just desserts. So fair play to him. But moving on now, we've got more head coaching departures. And you never really get this many in season anyhow. Normally a lot of teams wait till the end. But in recent years, the spate of firings in mid-season seems to have gone up, and there've been 3 more this week, or 2 more have been fired, and 1 has been told he won't be coming back. So starting off, the biggest one, Virginia Tech, their head coach, Justin Fuente, is gone, and he's been replaced by the defensive line coach, J.C. Price, who's going to serve as their interim head coach. His final record in Virginia was 43-31 after 6 seasons in charge. He did start really well in his first 2 seasons. He got 19 wins, so that was a good start for him. But there's sort of a mixture of issues, really, that have caused his tenure to end there. He's not been great at recruiting. They've been often big complaints about his recruiting classes. Virginia Tech have been hit really hard by the transfer portal. They've lost 42 players to the transfer portal in just his 6 years there. That is a lot of players to lose. And some of those guys, one of them was Hendon Hooker, the quarterback at Tennessee, who's doing a decent job there. And ironically, that's one of the things that's led to his downfall here. He came in with a reputation for being able to develop quarterbacks. And that's one thing he just hasn't done at Virginia Tech. He's not developed himself a real top-notch quarterback since 2016. And, his inability to do that mixed with a lack of progress on the field. I mean, they started really well this year. That first game against UNC, you thought, wow, good team here. But they've just not progressed. There's been some bad defeats in there. And I think, given all those issues he's had and put it all together, it's probably the right decision. And all of a sudden now there's a vacancy there, which a lot of people are going to be eyeing, because there's a great deal of potential there at Virginia Tech.
Yeah, it feels like the opening win of the season was a bit of a smoke screen. Everyone, all the Virginia Tech hockey fans must have thought, wow, like that's quite a big upset. Like we could be in for a big year. Now, this is a bad year. The ACC is really bad this year. As a general, it's just underperformed from one of the worst group of Power 5 conferences. And that has really hurt him. The fact they've not been able to compete in such a down year questions his credentials overall. As you say, he has an overall winning record. He's about just like 500, 550 under 600. So he's had a good tenure there. But when you lose 7 players a year to transfer portal, that tells you that maybe the culture was worrying. You can bring them in, but why can't you keep them? Like, why are players feeling they have to go somewhere else? Because Blacksburg, we've seen the Enter the Sandman. They've got a great student thing. That is a great home to play football. It's a great rivalry, like say, with the Cavaliers. It's a historic team, the Hokies. And they've had good quarterbacks, like say Hendon Hooker, who felt he had to move on to progress. He went to Tennessee.
He's at Tennessee now.
Like say that was it, and they have a very crowded quarterback room, which tells you he felt he had to go even to join a busy room. And just overall play, they've sent some players to the draft, but as you say, on the field and in conference play, he's just not done the business. And this year started off promising, but it quickly petered out. And now I believe I think their current record's 5-5, so they're kind of middle in the road. But simply, that's not good enough. Not in such a big state like Virginia. So I wish him all the best. I feel like he will get picked up pretty quickly. He shouldn't have hard time finding work, but I think their next appointment is going to have to be really important now because they're a bit of a transition period. They're losing players, reloading. I don't feel like they've had those recruitment classes to fill them. They lost Caleb Farley. I didn't see the likes of those players getting replaced. So someone's got to come in that's probably a bit of a big name. They need someone flashy that can actually bring some players to them because they can't keep living off 2- and 3-star recruits. Not if things want to uptick, because Clemson will be better next year. UNC, who knows, could be better next year. Wake Forest could carry on if Hartman stays. The ACC is going to bounce back. It's going to get better, and they're going to get left behind very, very quickly.
Yeah, you're right, but I know it should be an attractive job for somebody. But like you say, the recruitment is crucial on this one, so it's going to be interesting to see in which direction they go with it. I've not seen any names spotted around so far, but it's one that I'm sure will be filled quite quickly. I'm sure there'll be plenty of applicants for it. But moving on, the second one this week, and we mentioned this last week as a likely possibility, but the Washington Huskies, their head coach Jimmy Lake, he's been fired. We recapped the whole Washington story last week. It's been a sorry mess this year. This was only his second year, I believe, but it's just not gone to track whatsoever. And it just, it culminated with him punching one of his own players the week before last. He was suspended for a game. The odds are he weren't going to come back, and they've subsequently fired him. So both Washington teams now are on the lookout for new head coaches after acrimonious departures, let's say. So that's the second one this week. And then the third one, Florida International, their head coach, Butch Davis, has been told he won't return next season. He will finish out this season, but after that, he's done for. He did want another deal, but they didn't want to give him one. He's been there 5 seasons. Overall, he's 24-30. He achieved 3 successive bowl appearances in his first 3 seasons, so had a really good start there. But over the last 2 years, their record is 1-14, and they got absolutely walloped 50 points to 10 by Middle Tennessee the weekend just gone. And so they've said enough is enough. There needs to be a change there as well. Washington one, not surprising, and the Florida one, given that 2-year record, not really surprising either.
No, Jimmy Lake unfortunately made his position very untenable. The moment he was suspended for this game, I thought if you're on Twitter, like if you're Washington fans, they knew he wouldn't be returning. It's kind of something you can't come back from. Even if you think it's tough love or a coach, it's just part of the game heat of the moment. It was poor timing. It didn't look good caught on TV. And then the players also didn't respond. They couldn't bounce back for him. We'll go into that later because I was very happy because someone got them at a good time. But no, unfortunately, the culture there, it seemed a bit toxic. It carried over to this week. Unfortunately, I feel sorry for Florida Atlantic because to be such a small team in such a big state, such a big pool of players, but finding it hard to recruit because how do you compete in the state of Florida when you're a smaller college against everyone around you? It is really hard. So those 2 years have not been kind to that side. The head coach was doing what he could the best with, but to get blown out by 40 points by an averaging Middle Tennessee team that's just decided to stay put and not move conference, that final nail in the coffin, unfortunately. And I don't envy whoever takes over that job because there's a lot of work to do there. and it's going to take some real effort to try just claw some of those players from the likes of Florida Atlantic, because FIU are kind of like the minnow in that pool.
Yeah, and the most unbelievable thing is that probably wasn't the most embarrassing performance by a Florida team this weekend, but that other team won. We'll talk about it in a bit, but they didn't even get the crown of worst Florida side this week, even though the other team won. That was a big one, but we're going to talk about that in a bit. And then finishing off the coach speak, we've had one coaching appointment this weekend. Well, I didn't see this one coming. I don't think many did. UConn, obviously one of the worst teams in the FBS currently, they have hired their new head coach. And to anyone who's a fan of going on YouTube and looking for coaches shouting and coming out with these verbose monologues, etc., are going to know this guy. So they've appointed former UCLA, New Orleans Saints, and Atlanta Falcons head coach Jim Mora. He last coached in 2017. He was the head coach at UCLA, and he had a 46-30 record before he was fired there. He is known for his famous post-game speeches, as I say, including his coulda, woulda, shoulda speech, which is a great one to go and watch, and also the one where he talks about his team literally got their asses kicked all game, did absolutely nothing right. It's probably one of the most brutal and honest post-match interviews you've ever seen, and I would recommend going to watch it if you've not seen it before. But I didn't see this appointment coming, Ryan. I don't know about you, but I didn't think he'd be on their hit list of coaches to go after.
I had no idea he was even still kicking around or would be interested in coaching. Don't get me wrong, he's super experienced. This is like a dream hire for some sides. I don't know how they've pulled this off, if he's done it as a favour, but it must take a bit of money, because I can't think of many more sides in the FBS that need a complete rebuild. Like UConn are like the Lions of college football. Like they need strengthening in every position. But more importantly, I feel like off the field, they need that connection back with their fans, because I imagine their crowds probably really struggle. There can't be much love for the Huskies, unfortunately, after such a bad few years. So it's going to take someone like this to maybe try ignite some passion back into those fans, and even before getting things right on the field. I think he'll look to try pick up a big transfer quarterback. There'll be probably some inside the pool at the end of the year. They could do with a notable name, someone that's willing to take on a challenge. But I applaud him. Bravo for taking on the test of UConn, because it won't be easy. The fans will quickly turn on you, because I imagine right now they're probably pretty bitter and upset about things. But if you're a UConn fan, I just ask, at least give some patience to the man, because this is no quick fix. This is a decade's worth of work and lack of recruiting. So it's going to take a while, but you may well get there in the end. So just give him a chance. He's going to be entertainment for sure.
Exactly. And if you're a player there, make sure you don't step out of line, because he will call you out about it to everybody afterwards. So maybe it's a bit of added motivation for the players as well. That, I believe, is just about everything for the coach talk this week. There's been loads going on, so if I've missed anything, I apologise. But we're going to move on to the rankings now. Obviously, we look through the Associated Press top 25, then we go through the playoff rankings. I'll just go through the AP top 25 for this week, and then we'll talk about the playoff ones, because that's where all the juicy stuff is. But so really sort of as it was for the top 5, I believe, last week. You've got Georgia, Alabama, Cincinnati, Oregon, Ohio State. And then 5 to 10, you've got Notre Dame, who've snuck their way up to 6th somehow. I don't know, but they are there. You've got Michigan State, Michigan, Oklahoma State, and Ole Miss. 10 to 20, you've got Baylor, you've got Oklahoma Sooners. That may give you an indication of how their weekend went, that they're quite far down the list now. Wake Forest, BYU, UTSA, Texas A&M, Houston, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Pittsburgh. And then rounding out the top 25, you've got Arkansas, Louisiana Lafayette, San Diego State, Utah, and NC State. We are down to just 3 unbeaten teams now, Ryan. Georgia, Cincinnati, and somehow UTSA are still there. You said you thought only one of those was going to finish the season undefeated. Is that changed after this weekend's results, or do you still expect a couple of them to lose before the season's done?
I've had a look at their schedules, and there's actually a realistic chance that all 3. Well, actually, I suppose 2 of the teams have got an easier chance of getting unbeaten, because they're going to play less teams. two of them are going to a bowl game, but they're not going to the playoffs. So if anything, it's Georgia that's got the hardest chance of going unbeaten, purely because they've got more chances to slip up. But UTSA, I watched half of their game and they started really slow this weekend. First half was not great. They really struggled, but they've got one of the best running backs in the entire country who's been shortlisted for an award, Sincere McCormack. He is just, whenever he's healthy and he's got like 30, 40 touches a game, you've got a chance to win every week. And they're just a really good side. And they're flying the flag for Texas, because Texas football this year has struggled phenomenally. And they're just a really nice, bright, good story. Cincinnati really didn't have to do much. Like I say, it was a pretty comfortable performance. You look at their schedule now and you think they might just nip this out. Still, they're not going to make the playoffs. I still don't think. Even if they go unbeaten, they'll still be ignored, which is no shame and credit against them. That's just the committee and levels of bias and whatever you want to say about the schedule. But I'm hanging my hat on now. I want all three to do me proud. In 3 weeks, we want to be sitting here and all three of them still unbeaten.
Exactly. When you go through this season highlighting them all every week, you start to form a bit of a connection with them and you hope that they don't lose. Obviously, the one that did lose this week, I don't think we were fussed whatsoever. We've both called them frauds. They were fraudulently found out. So, bit of karma there for them. And your favourite team are up in 6th, Notre Dame sneaking in there. How great would that be if one of the top 4 slipped up and they snuck in a playoff spot?
It'd be an absolute travesty. Like, you look online, and still no one rates Notre Dame. If it would be an absolute disaster if they even finished in the top 5, because there's at least 6 or 7 teams that should be ahead of them, in my opinion. They just don't look convincing. I can get this squeak over the line every week, but they just don't feel you have any confidence. 2 free quarterbacks every week are taking snaps. It's just become a thing now where they rotate who's under center, and it's just not healthy, even if it somehow works for them. But like I say, it's one of them things. Like there's a big snub as well. We'll talk about them later. For their running back, who has probably helped them more than anyone this year. They've really relied on Kylan Williams at times, and we'll leave the injuries because we'll talk about someone that's probably not coming back.
Yeah. We'll do that in a moment. So I'll move straight on to the playoff rankings then. So we're going to look see who's in there. So the top 7 haven't changed from last week. You've got Georgia, Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State. They're currently the 4 slated to play each other in the playoffs. Then you've got Cincinnati, Michigan, and Michigan State rounding out the top 7. Number 8 is Notre Dame. So they're getting close. They're the next of the best there now. Then you've got Oklahoma State and Wake Forest rounding out the top 10. 10 to 20, you've got Baylor, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, BYU, Wisconsin moving up again, Texas A&M, Iowa, Pittsburgh, San Diego State, and North Carolina State. And then 20 to 25, you've got Arkansas, UTSA, Utah, Houston, and 4-loss Mississippi State are apparently the 25th most eligible team to play in the playoffs after losing 4 games. Any comments on that, Ryan? I know probably not much has changed at the top, bar one team in the top 10 losing this week. But outside of that, there's some suspicious, probably some say uninvited characters into this list that shouldn't be there.
The likes of, Iowa shouldn't be there. I know they had a good win at the weekend. They beat a ranked team, but come on, we've already seen the fact that they're not anywhere near good enough to be counted as a top 20, 25 team. Wisconsin are hard because over the last 5 games, they've won 5 in a row. They've dominated everyone. And across the last 5 games, they're conceding on points, I think, less than average than Georgia defense. So across the last 5 games and those 5 wins, I'm pretty sure they've got the best defense in the whole nation. And they're running the ball hard. But why couldn't they have started the season like this? If they'd have started the season this well, I would justify having them in top 15. But 3-loss team, it's a bit high. If they can actually see this out, though, if they can win 2 more games, if they can cause an upset and go into their maybe sneak into a title game, they might finish the year in the top 10. But unfortunately, a 3-loss team can never ever make the playoffs. I like where Notre Dame are in this list. I think 8 is actually where they belong. I think a bit high in the AP poll. I'll say this every week until it happens. When you've got 2 teams that have faced one another and you have the loser above the winner, it takes away all credibility in the entire list, because that is a direct head-to-head tiebreaker.
Well, it's an odd one because Oregon are above Ohio State on that reason, but then the Spartans are below the Wolverine. But I don't really see much of a difficulty in schedule. I mean, I guess this weekend there was an increase in opposition and they both won. But outside of that, Michigan State should go. But I think they've got a prime opportunity to put themselves in there this week. When we go on the next preview, they've got a prime opportunity to wallop themselves right up this list. So yeah, that's how it stays for now. Georgia, Alabama, Oregon, and Ohio State are currently going to be contesting the playoffs. There's 2 weeks left, so a lot can happen. But, as I say, we'll see how the situation develops. So that's everything for the rankings, really, this week. Now, Ryan mentioned earlier, obviously, the Senior Bowl call-ups are starting to occur. Invitations are getting sent out. Players are starting to accept. The Senior Bowl is the big game at the end of the season where sort of the creme de la creme of the leagues players get invited. They take part in a big game, and it's a prime opportunity for scouts to get up close and personal with some of these players going up to the draft. I know I saw by your Twitter the other day, Ryan, you've been keeping a very close eye on who's declaring for this and who you think the Lions should be having a little scout at. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the Senior Bowl, the players you're looking at, etc., just who we should be looking out for?
Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know, the Reese's Pieces Senior Bowl is a all-star game that will be before the playoffs. It's coached by NFL coaches. Last year, Matt Patricia, when our old head coach, he got first-hand. He was one of the head coaches, so it's a great opportunity to see players that don't necessarily get enough love. It's kind of for those fringe guys, the smaller schools. It's not a game where you have stars, which is the best thing. They get invited to train together, meet up, they play. It's kind of like a Pro Bowl. It's a bit different rules because they don't want to hurt one another, but it's the huge stage where you can really show what you want to do. So there's only been so many people invited so far. They've not filled the rosters yet, but from the players I've seen that I think the Lions should look at, I'll just name a few and then I'll go through them. The first quarterback I saw was from Western Kentucky. That's Bailey Zappi. He's an absolute star. Then you've got two safeties. You've got Jaquari Brisker, Penn State, who a lot of people like the Lions. Sterling Weatherford, one of the smaller guys from Miami, Ohio. I believe had Devon Price, who's a smaller school running back I'm not sure about that people think is really good. Devin Lloyd, one of the star Pac-12 linebackers from the Utah Utes, is someone that people want to look at. You've also had the likes of, there's quite a lot of offensive linemen, 2 minutes to go through, but I think this was kind of the game last year where it was Miners. Quinn Miners had a great game from Wisconsin Whitewater, and he elevated his stock really well. So these are kind of guys I believe we should be looking at. There's some wide receivers as well. So for me, Zappi is something that's really interesting. He was at Houston Baptist. He was an FCS. This guy's thrown for over 10,000 yards in over 4 years. He has over 100 touchdowns. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks of the last 4 or 5 years. He comes from Western Kentucky Hilltoppers now, transferred to the FBS, where Mike White, the Jets stud, came from. He's having a phenomenal year. He's already thrown for 42 touchdowns this year, just to 7 interceptions. People really like this guy. He's not the biggest, he's not got the strongest arm, but it's someone that people should really look out for because he could be one of those middle round projects. Super experienced, got a lot to go for, and he's someone that we may very well take a good look at next year. You've got Jaquan Brisker, the Penn State safety. He hits hard. He's not the biggest. He's not the stockiest. He's around that 5'11", 6 foot range, but he flies side to side. He's got great lateral movement, good hips, comes down hard and meets running backs really well. For someone I'd like to see is a bit more working on that strong safety position where I see him at the next level. I think he's going to get a really good workout. He's also been named to an awards list, so that tells you these are very high caliber players. Got likes of another safety, Sterling Weatherford, a Ranger leader from Miami, Ohio. He's a good 6'3", long frame, does everything, tackles, gets interceptions, passes defended, forces fumbles. Just a jack of all trades, someone that we could look to rely on that back end. And I'm going to be keeping up with more names as well. I'll keep tweeting them out through the week, but more invitations came out today. So once we've got a full list, I'm going to put together a whole watch list for everyone, and I'm going to look at that in a future episode. But if anyone wants to look, check on Twitter, getting announced every day, and people have hashtag the draft starts in Mobile, and you'll find all this information about them.
Yeah, I think as it comes closer to the game and we know what the rosters are, we'll have to take a little bit more in-depth look at some of the guys there and come up with some little lists of people to keep an eye on during it. But it's going to be an absolute fun one for sure. So that's a little bit there on the Senior Bowl that's coming up. And just to finish off, Ryan did mention there were a few injuries this week. We're not doing the injury corner anymore because it's that close to the end of the season that even a small injury can rule you out now. But a few notable bits that I saw this week, and Ryan, feel free to add on if you saw any more. But we mentioned about Kyle Hamilton, the Notre Dame safety, the other week. He had a knock and he'd missed a few games, and we wondered whether he was going to see the season out or whether he was going to end it prematurely just to keep his draft stock intact. And it turns out that he went for the latter option. His season is now over unless they reach the playoffs and he is required in those, in which he might come back. But the odds are against Notre Dame there. So it looks like he's done, and he's going to be prepping himself up for the draft now, where he could well be the highest picked safety in history. There's a very good chance of that happening. And then the other one, I saw a guy who's really elevated his draft stock this year and has really dragged his team along at times. Bijan Robinson, the running back from Texas. He's had an almighty year. He got injured at the weekend in a game that I'm spotlighting today because it's a huge result. His season is over. But again, yeah, he's had another amazing year. I think he's gone for well over 1,000 yards in there. And he's a name that we're probably going to be getting very familiar with if you're looking at running backs in the draft. So I think two sensible decisions from those guys there, because they've got a lot riding on this draft, and there's really no need for either of them, given their team's respective seasons, to carry on playing.
No. If you're a player, you can look at it two ways. Like, if a player kind of has surgery, gets healthy, but he's draft eligible and he decides not to return, you can see it as them quitting on the team. But if you look at these two guys where one's had a season-ending injury, but Hamilton is just going to look towards the draft. Bowl games are so overrated. Unless you make a handful of certain bowls, the rest of them are they're kind of worthless. They're just a trophy. You do not put your health on the line when you've got pro aspirations. So Hamilton, unless they somehow sneak into the playoffs, even once he gets healthy, you may see him on the sideline, but you won't see him again as in the Fighting Irish uniform, because he's not going to risk his health. And Robinson, he's got more time, so it's a shame it's ended, but he's had a phenomenal year. Texas season has totally just fizzled out completely, unfortunately, but he has carried them on his back and he has a bright future. And another big injury I saw, Bo Nix. Now, don't matter what people think of Auburn, they're very up and down, but unfortunately he's had surgery, he fractured his ankle in this weekend's game, so he's done for the rest of the year now. He won't return. I think he's got a decision to make about whether he wants to return or enter the class. That's not how you want to end your year, unfortunately, when there's still questions about you. So for Auburn, that's a huge loss going into trying to finish out a respectable year, but they're going to have to rely very much on Tank Bigsby now to carry them across the line.
I don't know. I feel like Nix has to come back for a year. I think even in this weaker draft class for quarterbacks, I don't think there's just going to be that much love in there for him, especially at the top of the draft. I don't know about you, but Auburn are frustrating to watch at times, and he's primarily the reason behind that. Because usually Bigsby can hold up his end of the deal, running the ball, but it's just sometimes him and his erratic performances just keep him down a little.
Yeah, there's weeks where Nix looks really good. And if you could build a quarterback physically, he'd look a bit like Bo Nix. He's got a good arm. He's got a big, stocky frame. He's a strapping lad. But sometimes he switches off. There's weeks where he just does not turn up. And I find it's often against the big sides. I've seen him go to sleep and not deliver. Like the Penn State game, he was okay, but that was a game to be there to be won. But It should have been easier. He should have stepped up when it matters. And I just question if he's got the mentality and the ability to the next level. I've not seen anyone mention him at all about the 2022 draft. He needs more time.
Yeah, I fully agree there. I don't expect to see him, and if he does, don't expect to see him on the first couple of days for sure. Maybe not at all. So, again, we'll see what happens with him, and I'm gonna be interested to see what he does. But I think he probably could do with another year back there. Is Bigsby eligible this year, or is he going to carry on?
No, I don't think he's eligible this year, which is good because it's a stacked running back class. I think if he comes back next year, the year after, he'll be right up there as one of the best.
I think as a quarterback as well, if you've got a running back of his caliber coming back, it gives you an incentive to stay because you can rely on him to help you out as well and make you look good. So I fully expect him to stay. So, we'll see with him. Right, so that's pretty much everything for the news this week. I know that was a long one, but come end of the season, news is coming out left, right, and centre. So we're going to dive down into the Week 11 review now, and this is not just going to be for the FBS this week, but Ryan's also going to give us a little insight into the FCS at the end as well. So let's get cracking, because again, a lot to go through. So, the little awards we do at the start of every week, we'll get them out the way first. So beating of the week that goes out to the team that wins by the most points. That goes to Nick Saban and Alabama this week. They absolutely wrecked the FBS Independence, New Mexico State, 59-3 for a winning margin of 56. They went to town in that game, and rightly so. You probably wouldn't expect a result other than that. The upset of the week, and I'm just going to say the score out for this one because there is a lot that I want to unpack. There's a lot of stats I've found out for this one and want to unpack, but this was a huge upset, and it was in the Big 12, but it's maybe not the game you're thinking of. It doesn't involve a ranked side upsetting a higher ranked side. This involves a team who we've barely talked about this year, one of the whipping boys in the FBS, and that's the Kansas Jayhawks. They went to the Texas Longhorns and they won 57-56 in what can only be described as an absolute shootout. That's going to be the first game in our review, so I'm going to leave it there just for now. And then the statement win of the week, actually, we're going to stay in the Big 12, and the game I just mentioned a minute ago, for me, Oklahoma Sooners, they lost their first game this year. They were beaten by the Baylor Bears 27-14. Now, Baylor have been a fun little side to watch this year. Have just sort of gone under the radar a little bit. And, we wondered who was going to give the first defeat to Oklahoma. And I think we said last week it could possibly be Baylor. I can't remember. I feel like I said Baylor could do it, and then it may have not. I might have said Caleb Williams. I want them to win for him. But yeah, Baylor won 27-14. That is a big statement win, Big 12 for them. Ryan, feel free to agree, disagree. What are your thoughts on those?
No, I totally agree. I think the fact that Oklahoma had to go back to Spencer Rattler, we saw him enter this game, which actually says a lot about the performance, because Caleb Williams sat him firm on his derriere the last few weeks. But Lincoln Riley felt the need to make a change during the game. And I think that tells you pretty much how well it went. And Baylor, worst time to play them. Baylor were pissed off, losing to TCU the week before, going to this big game. When you back an animal like a bear into a corner, they usually bite back. So they bounce back in a big way. And they're firmly in their division. They're firmly in that conference title race. Like, Baylor having a great year. If things go well in the next 2 weeks, they could be up for a meteoric rise in the playoff rankings. We cannot rule them out of anything just yet. So there's so much on the line in that game.
Yeah, I think we looked at it as one of the intriguing ones. I did watch it. I felt sorry. It's just like I want Caleb Williams to do so well, and to see Rattler come back in was a bit of a pain. I hope they give him another week. I don't think there's any point bringing Rattler back now. He's coming back next year. I think he's lost too much of this season to, make his draft stock back. There's only 2 games left. The odds of him going to the playoffs are shot now. So, I hope they do stick with him. But we'll have a chat about that game in a bit. But the first one that we're going to talk about this week, it's nothing to do with bowl games, nothing to do with playoffs, nothing to do with rankings. I've just mentioned it here. The Kansas Jayhawks went to the Texas Longhorns and beat them 57-56. Now, just to put this result into perspective and why it's the upset of the week, Texas were favourites in this game by 30.5 points. No, that's over 4 touchdowns worth favourites in this. And they lost. Kansas, for them, this is their first road win in the Big 12 since 2008. Yes, that is 2008. That was 13 years ago and spans a period of 56 games that they've not won on the road. And for Texas and Steve Sarkisian, this is a very humiliating defeat. They've now lost 5 in a row. We've given them a lot of love this year because that offense did a lot of good things early on. And even when they've been losing, they've still been putting up a lot of points. But the franchise itself, 5 in a row they've lost. That's the worst run of form they've had in 65 years. This is a very long time since they lost 5 in a row. And as I could say, they were 30.5 point favourites in this. And during the game, they panned in on a section of the crowd where the Texas recruits for next year were sitting, and they were sat there visibly laughing at the team's performance. They were mocking the team that they're going to be joining next year. I'm expecting maybe a few decommits to come from this one, but I mean, no one in a month of Sundays saw this result coming. This is embarrassing on a scale that is not heard of for the Texas Longhorns. And Sarkisian has got to be now on a hot seat, even though he shouldn't be, really, given the amount of time he's into this. His seat's got to be hotter than a ghost pepper chili by now.
Yeah, he will be feeling the heat for sure. And he's a first-year head coach, but he knew full well that things at Texas last few years haven't been great. He took this job knowing that the moment you step on that sideline, he's under huge pressure. The Texas Longhorns job is one of the biggest in football. Everyone knows them. They're expected to compete. And like I said, the season started so well. That game where they destroyed Texas Tech for that first half, and they were just riding high on, like say, that 5-win streak. And summer has just happened. They have just completely crumbled. 5 losses in a row. His tenure now has become, he will just be praying for the end of the year. The Texas fans can't wait for this season to end. And for anyone that doesn't know much about the Big 12, the Kansas Jayhawks, they are the Vanderbilt Commodores, basically, of the SEC. They are the worst team in the conference. They are the whipping boys of the last 5-10 years. You look at that every year and you go, that's an easy win. Every conference has a side like that. Unfortunately, Kansas like that. But they put 57 points. If you look at their year, or go back a few years, they've probably not scored this many points in a game for, I couldn't even imagine how long, maybe 20, 30 years easily, because they are not a high-powered side. They don't have big recruits. But they took a chance to pick on a vulnerable team, but Texas were on a big skid, and they somehow survived. Like, if Texas put 57 points on a team, usually you'd expect them to win 100 times out of 100. Not this week. They just could not get off the field. They kept motivating them. They kept giving them reasons to keep believing. And in the end, it was a historic finish. Crowd swarmed. Had to snap the sticks off the goalpost. Everything came down. A lot of Kansas fans will remember this result as long as they live. And it's probably the greatest result in some very young people's lifeline.
Yeah, if you go onto YouTube and you're looking for Kansas Jayhawks fans, there's this viral video going around of this one guy and his reactions during the game, and they're absolutely, beautiful, as funny as they are, really. There's just this guy going absolutely crazy. He's there on his own as like the only Kansas fan in that area, wherever. And yeah, it's a wonderful video to watch, and you should give it a look. But yeah, for Kansas, this was a huge day for them, and they really did it in all facets of the game. Jalen Daniels, the quarterback, he threw 202 yards, 3 touchdowns. He got a rushing touchdown. Devin Neal, the running back for them, he had a day and a half. He got 143 rushing yards at 6 yards a carry. He got 3 touchdowns, and then he got a receiving touchdown as well. So that was 4 for him for the day. And their defense, although this wasn't really a day for defenses, they were able to pick off the Texas quarterbacks twice, which did give them a little bit of a leverage shift in the game, which was good for them. On Texas' side, you can't blame the quarterback in this one. Casey Thompson, their quarterback, he threw 30 of 43 358 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. He also rushed for a touchdown. So he had a hand in 7 touchdowns. So you can't attribute anything to him there. Bijan Robinson, the running back, before he went off injured, he got 70 rushing yards, 48 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Another decent game for him. And the receivers loaded up on Thompson's throw-in. Xavier Worthy, 152 yards, 3 touchdowns. Marcus Robinson, 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. You kind of feel sorry for Casey Thompson a bit. He's having a good run of form at the minute, but it's just getting hidden by the huge amount of points they're letting up. There's not some good teams either.
No, it hurts. You kind of look at Sam Howell and you think, like, there's guys out there that are worth feeling sorry for, because this Texas team isn't full of scrubs. Like, they've got DeMarvion Overshawn, who was supposed to be one of the best linebackers in the whole nation. And then you see a team like that giving 57 points up to Kansas. Like, that is disastrous for guys' draft stock. And also it makes a quarterback completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter what you do. If the moment they get the ball back, they march down the field, they score, and you have to get on the field because you don't get a break. The players must have been tired because every moment they got off the field, they were going straight back on. The offense, the defense, they could not catch a break and they could not put the game away. I think that was the worst thing, that there was no finishing, there's no bite in Texas. No one fears them. All that fear power they've ever had is just gone now. And unfortunately, losing their home run Robinson, they've lost that ability to finish games off and control the clock, because now it's good having a passing offense, but that can stop the clock a lot more often than you want to. And it can give teams a lot of encouragement if you score too quickly, or if you can't control downs and distance. Having no run game is disastrous, and it kind of proves it, because they lost him fairly early, and now it's going to be interesting to see now, can they finish the season with a win? Is there another win left in this roster, or are they going to skid? And is Sarkisian going to be one and done? Because it's not out of possibility to possibly see him fired after just 1 year.
Exactly. Like I say, if they don't win another game either, the noise for him to go is going to be absolutely huge. So you hope for his sake they are able to pull a few more wins out, especially without Robinson, because that offense revolves around him. And as is shown, Thompson can't do it all on his own. He got 7 touchdowns he was involved in this, and he was still on the losing side. So, you've got to feel for him a little there. But moving on from one coach who's getting towards the hot seat to one coach who is definitely on the hot seat, and it feels like just a matter of time now. And this was the weird thing. They won this weekend, and yet his job security got even worse. We mentioned earlier about Florida International not having the worst result in Florida this weekend, even though the team who did worse than them won. Well, that goes to the Florida Gators this week. So they were playing Samford, and if you've never heard of Samford before, the Bulldogs, then you'd be, it's no surprise. They play in the FCS, and they're currently joint 5th in the FCS Southern Conference. So it's not like they're the creme de la creme of an FCS division at the minute either. They're just a middling team in one of the conferences there. And Florida ended up winning this game 70 points to 52. They gave up 52 points to a middling FCS team. Now, just to put this into perspective, in the first half, they gave up 42 of those points. So they were losing at the half. Samford had put up 42 points on them, which is the most that's ever been allowed by Florida in the first half of a game ever, period, by anybody. Even the best in the FBS haven't put that many past them. That's just how much Samford were able to do to them there. The 52 total points that they scored, that's the most scored by an FCS team against an SEC opponent ever. And it's tied for most points allowed by a Power 5 team against an FCS opponent since the FCS split in 1978. I believe it was East Washington in 2014 or something that also got 52 points there. But Dan Mullen, his days are numbered. He fired his defensive coach a few weeks back to try and save his job, and then they go and give up 52 points to an FCS team that aren't even that good. I think these guys were beaten by Chattanooga like 55-10 a couple of weeks back. This was an embarrassment for them.
It was. Dan Mullen's days are over. He might have these 2 games, but he probably will have been told at full time, you're gone. Like, your days are over as a Florida. I would have fired him at halftime. I would literally have said, you're not going back out. I'd have come down from the press box. It is one of, like, the score in the end is totally irrelevant because it's not a win. It's a win on paper, but it's awful. If you concede 42 points in the first half to Georgia or Alabama, that's bad, but at least you understand. If you concede 42 points to the Sanford Bulldogs, a middling nobody Division 2 school, the week after you fired your defensive coordinator, so now you can't even use him as a scapegoat. I bet we should have kept him a week longer. That is devastating. That tells you that this team is going absolutely nowhere. Even with dynamic quarterbacks on the roster, the defense is horrible. I don't know if that defense is going to send anyone to the draft this year because they have not been able to keep points off the board in most games this year. They just cannot shut people out. And playing down to an FCS opponent and then clamping it down in the second half and kind of running away with it, it does not impress anyone. It just makes you look silly, like you did not take the game seriously whatsoever.
No, it's like there's no justification for this whatsoever. And like I say, he could have fired the defensive coach on Monday and people would have understood and been like, you know what, maybe it is his fault. But like I said, he's fired the proverbial bullet a little too early. I think he thought, oh, well, we've got an FCS team next. We'll not concede many. I'll look good. And it's completely and utterly backfired on him. And yeah, it's only a matter of when, not if anymore. He's got to be going soon. I mean, Samford, even though they gave up a lot of points, their offense, really good day for them. So their quarterback, he's called Liam Welch. He went 33 for 52. He threw 400 yards against an FBS defense, which is meant to be all right. He got 3 touchdowns and interception. He also rushed for 65 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he had 5 touchdowns, assists on the day, which was big for him. But the award for most versatile player of the week goes to their wide receiver, Montrell Washington. So get this. He played quarterback. He threw 1 of 1 for 16 yards. So he played quarterback. He rushed 3 for 19. So he was a running back and he scored a touchdown on a rush. He was 10 for 124 yards in the receiving game and he got another touchdown. And he was also the kick returner, 5 kick returns, 179 yards and a kick return touchdown. So he had a rushing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, a kick return touchdown, and he was quarterback. So, fair play to him for that there. J. Roos Creamer, 7 for 96. Michael Weiss, 4 for 94 and a touchdown. So it's going to be a memorable week for them. They're going to remember that for a long time, putting up 52 points on an FBS side. They'll be delighted. On Florida's side, the defense may have been a shambles, but at least the offense got to rack up their stats as well. Emory Jones, 464 yards, 6 touchdowns, 10 rushes for 86 yards, and a rushing touchdown. So he had over 500 yards and 7 touchdowns on the day. Running backs, Damian Pierce, 7 for 78, 2 touchdowns. He also got a receiving touchdown. And Naquan Wright, 47 yards, 53 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Keyboard Gamble, the receiver, 122 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Justin Shorter, 93 yards. That was a bit of an offense fest there. And there were just 2 sacks all game in a stat that will be, surprising to absolutely nobody in a game when you give up about 130 odd points when you're done and dusted. But it's an all right day to be an offensive player in that one. But if you're a defensive guy, if you're a defensive coordinator, then, it's a headache for this week, let's say.
It would be because the offense in Florida was so good. Even against an FBS team, like, their offense can score points. They can score points heavily. They've got 2 dynamic quarterbacks that can swap in and out. It should be a privilege to be the head coach of Florida because you've got some fantastic offensive weapons. You've got some okay defensive weapons, but you've got to use them properly. Dan Mullen obviously has no idea how to get the best out of them, or they just didn't take this seriously in practice all week. They just didn't turn up prepared, and they got totally shell-shocked. And then they woke up, and that's not good enough. Like, if you're not showing a team's respect, and then they put a shellacking on you in the first half. That's just down to you. That's just down to poor management and preparation for the game. Sanford took it as a loss, but those players will remember that day for the rest of their lives, the day that they got Dan Mullen fired.
And they probably have as well. It might not happen now, but I think that result's put the final nail in his coffin and put to bed any notion that you might have a future there. So, I think there'll be a lot of coaches eyeing up that position because, like you say, it's a big franchise. It's potential to do well at college level. And you've seen this year in spurts that, this is a team that nearly beat Alabama, and yet then they give up 50 to an FCS team. It's just like, what gives? There's got to be something there. But we've spent a bit of time on this, so we'll move on. So we've had sort of two of the fun games up first. Now we're going to look at some more of the ranked fixtures. So obviously, only one team in the top 10 lost this week, which is an absolute surprise given this season. There's usually at least 2 or 3 on there, but most of them held up their ends pretty well. Obviously, we mentioned it already. That's the Oklahoma Sooners. They lost to Baylor 14 points to 27. Baylor sort of ran this one down the Sooners. They were pretty level for the first 3 quarters, but then Baylor ended up running away with it. But it was mainly down to their run game. So Jerry Bohannon, their quarterback, he only threw for 117 yards, a touchdown and an interception. He rushed for 107. So he rushed nearly as much as he threw, and he got 2 rushing touchdowns. And their actual running back, Abram Smith, got another 148 rushing yards, although he didn't get any touchdowns. They got 5 sacks, 2 interceptions, so they put a lot of pressure on Caleb Williams. This was his first big test. He sort of adjusted very well to Oklahoma so far, and he even was getting in the Heisman conversation, which was ridiculous. But, it's because he was playing really well, but he had a bad day. As Ryan mentioned, he got subbed out. He went 10 of 19, 146 yards, 2 interceptions. Didn't throw any receiving touchdowns. He did rush for 17 yards, though, and he got a rushing touchdown. Spencer Rattler came in 4 of 6, 36 yards. Kennedy Brooks at running back, 13 for 51 and 1 touchdown, but I think that was the only one they scored on the day, apart from Williams. It was just the 2 rushing ones, no receiving ones. And Gabe Burkich, their kicker, missed both his field goal attempts, which is kind of humiliating because I had him on my list of players I wanted us to draft a few weeks back. But this was an ugly performance, but they've had it coming for a very long time, the Sooners have, and finally it's caught up with them.
It has, yeah. They've rode their luck against some opponents, like say week 1 against Tulane. So I feel sorry for also, like say Caleb Williams. He's played really well. He's been like on a bit of a crest of a wave right now. I think this was wrong time, wrong place. They didn't want the Baylor team that had just been upset, that were pretty pissed off. So they thought Oklahoma was a great shot for them to bounce back, take a bit of a scalp, do their own rankings boost, the world of good. And they did really well. The defense totally stifled. It confused Caleb Williams. They didn't know what the defense were doing when they were dropping back into coverage. The safeties, the cornerbacks, they put a good blanket on those players. They ended his day shortly with 2 ill-advised interceptions. And then Lincoln Riley's made the decision to just say, before you look any worse or this game gets far away from us, I'm going to bring in Rattler, who is rusty. He's a bit cold, like the arm's cold, it's not warm. So I didn't expect him to even... There was never any point where I thought he's going to come in, he's going to take this game by storm, and he's going to get them right back in this, because he just doesn't seem like that kind of guy. Bohannon, the Baylor quarterback, had a pretty good year. He's looked pretty good. He's been serviceable in most games. He protects the ball pretty well. They move down the field. But the defense was what key was for Baylor. They stifled their run game. They kept them in check. They took the ball away at times, crucial turnovers. And for me, this game has bigger meanings because now I question at the end of the year, Oklahoma, are both teams going to enter both quarterbacks going to enter the transfer portal? Is this the place either quarterback wants to be? Like, there's going to have to come down to a head. I can feel like the tension is building now with who's the guy here. So I think there's big questions now. And I feel like Oklahoma could follow this up with another loss. Like, the moment you kind of get knocked off that perch, you're instantly vulnerable.
Well, we'll look at it in the preview, but their next game is what was predicted to be their hardest fixture this season. But then the team they're playing have been inconsistent themselves this year. They lost again this week. This defense can't keep points off the board to save their lives. But I know you're right. This could start an end of season spiral for them. But I think it's going to be very telling. It's going to be very interesting as to who he puts in now, because you wouldn't expect him to make two big quarterback changes in one season in such a short amount of time. You at least give Caleb Williams, just let him see the season out, see how he does, and then evaluate next year, see which quarterback you want, which you don't want. And like you say, one of them will go into the portal and look for pastures anew. But yes, bad week for Oklahoma. They'll be hoping they can bounce back, and they're going to need to, because another loss could be potentially fatal for their season. Mentioned about Rattler being a little cold. Well, two quarterbacks who are not cold are Sam Howell and Kenny Pickett. And we picked this one out last week, no pun intended. This was one of the early games in the week. This was UNC at Pittsburgh. We highlighted it as a game to watch. If you are a Lions fan and you're looking at quarterback prospects moving into this draft, these are two guys who you are going to want to keep your eyes on. This was a game of two halves, and then there was some overtime afterwards, but Pittsburgh absolutely dominated the first half. UNC dominated the second, and then it went into overtime, and Pittsburgh snuck out the win. They ended up winning 30 points to 23. It was a big win for them, a big win for Kenny Pickett. But first half, Pittsburgh went in 23-7 to the good. In the second half, UNC won 16-0. They adjusted and they came back out and they got themselves back into the game, not before trying to get Sam Howell killed beforehand. He took about 6 sacks and several big hits in the first half. The fact that he managed to come out and rally them in that game, if you watched it, should just be another reason why you should be liking Sam Howell more and more. The fact that he was able to get up and come back out and get them to overtime was something in itself. So, like I say, Pittsburgh took it in overtime. The quarterbacks both had decent days. Sam Howell, he went 22 of 33, 296 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception. He also got a rushing touchdown. Ty Chandler had a quiet one at running back, just 42 rushing yards. And I think this is how Pittsburgh stymied this game. They stopped the run game. Ty Chandler's been huge for UNC recently, helping them put up some big scores. They can expand the offense with him playing well, but they kept him really quiet. But their receiving core continues to get better. Josh Downs got another 95 yards. He's already turning into a stud of a receiver who you're going to hear about a lot in the future. And Antoine Green, he got 3 receptions for 108 yards, 2 touchdowns. So that's averaging about 33 yards a throw, and 66% of his catches were touchdowns. So a great day for him. And then Jeremiah Gemmell, the linebacker, he got a sack, an interception, and 10 tackles. So a busy day for him on the UNC defense. Kenny Pickett, he had a great game as well. 25 of 43, 346 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Again, their running game a little slow. Israel Abanikanda, 63 yards on 12 carries. Receiving game, Jordan Addison got 84 yards. Jared Wayne, 70 and a touchdown. Lucas Krull, 51 and a touchdown. So evenly shared out targets there. But this Pittsburgh defense, I think the story of this one is they absolutely battered the hell out of Sam Howell in this game, and it was painful to watch at times. And the fact that he came back into this game and got them back into it was remarkable. And for me, it just elevated in my eyes even further.
This is the tale of North Carolina's year, isn't it? Sacks. I haven't looked at the stat numbers, but if I had to look, I would expect them to be up there as one of the Power 5 teams that have eaten the most sacks, because we saw that Sam Howell had to leave the game for a drive last week against Wake Forest because he got hurt, he got crunched, and then you don't protect him again. It's a game of 2 halves, and the team that started the slowest and got crunched in the end was the team that was playing catch up all the time and couldn't get over the line. 6 sacks in a half. Like, no quarterback should be able to withstand that. It's just not feasible. It's not fair on putting him in a bad position. But we can't be surprised because Pitt just sent 2 defensive ends to the draft last year. They generate pressure. Their defensive scheme is, we want to blitz. We want to bring pressure. 4-man fronts, 5-man fronts, send blitzers, rush off the edge. They want to attack the weakness of North Carolina, which for me has been their offensive line. Their game plan really worked. They got the balance off. They got in the backfield. They stopped Ty Chandler, as you say, which is really big because he's been pretty consistent running the ball in the last few weeks. And so has Howell. They managed to set the edge and keep them in the pocket where they want him to be so they can tee off on him. Pickett was good. He had a nice game, moved the ball well, picked on the safety, Kelly. Like I saw a few of them, like he tried to look him off a few times and he did. He looks off the safety well. Jordan Addison, he's got a good weapon that's pretty speedy. In the second half, I feel like they just kind of G'd themselves up coming out the half. Sam Howell probably thought to himself, like, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down in a blaze of glory. I'm beating up. The season's been like this. And it worked. They got something going. The pocket held up and he managed to find, as you say, the star receiver, Josh Downs, a few times. Once it dragged to overtime, it should never have got to overtime, really. I think Pitt should have put this game to bed. They took their foot off the gas. They kind of took their foot off Howell's throat a little bit, gave him room to breathe, and it was a good comeback from them. In overtime, it was a bit messy, but they managed to get the job done. But it was a good half for two quarterbacks that have got aspirations in the draft. I much prefer one to the other. There's a lot of questions about Pickett, even though he may be the more ready guy. I still have my doubts. Obviously, he's got tiny baby hands. They're smaller than Jared Goff's, who's got tiny hands. Where's his gloves? I have questions about his grip. Obviously, his age, he's going to have to start straight away because he's a few years older than everyone else. So he's on borrowed time already. Howell, like I say, just keeps falling in shit and smelling out of roses. Pardon my French, because he keeps going in these bad games and coming out of them better than he went in. Like the stats are there. He looks good on a bad team. So for a loss, they both probably didn't damage anything. Probably gave everyone a better feeling of where they stand next year.
Well, see, I was watching this and I saw Howell getting a lot more grief than Pickett was on social media. I'm just like, well, hang on a minute. Howell's getting beaten to within an inch of his life, and Pickett's basically getting a year to make his throws. He's under no pressure whatsoever. I think given the respective situations they were in, I think, like you said, both of them did a really good job, but Howell especially, because he just gets no time to throw the ball whatsoever. His offensive line just collapsed. It's like they vanish. You don't even know where they go. But I thought it was unwarranted, the criticism he got in that. Because, I mean, like I say, 6 sacks, all that pressure, it's hard for a quarterback to work under those circumstances.
I've seen lots of comparisons this week from Howell to Baker Mayfield. People keep calling him Baker Mayfield. Now, I don't know if that's because of his stature. They're built very similar. They've got reasonably good arms, but for me, that's where the comparisons end. I don't really see the other issues there, or I don't see the erraticism. Howell's kind of tidied that up because he's worked in his run game. He's a much better rusher than Baker Mayfield is. Like he can take off and do design runs better. So I think it's a good comparison because obviously Baker Mayfield's a good quarterback, but I don't feel like that works out to his draft expectations. But no, he's getting a lot of criticism. People are trying to use that comparison to shit on him a little.
I think someone's going to get a steal with him in the draft. If people start buying into this stuff about him, I think he's going to slide and one team's going to go, oh my God, let's go get him. I think someone could end up feasibly trading up to get him at this stage. I feel that confident if he does fall a little bit, someone's going to snap him up. I can't see anyone passing on him, especially after the year he's had. All his weapons gone. He's making new stars. He's showed that he's one of the toughest quarterbacks in the entire FBS. Got to stand instead for him, doesn't it?
Well, I saw someone this weekend. It was one of the pro draft networks. They give him a 5th round grade. And I thought that was incredibly harsh. Like right now, I'd put him in the 2nd to 3rd round with someone trading up in those rounds to get him if he falls out the first. But 5th to 7, I thought that for his body of work.
Take my 5th round pick now. If the Lions walk away with Sam Howell in the 5th round of this draft, as well as getting like Kayvon and someone else. It's going to be the best draft of all time. I don't care. That is going to be the best draft of all time if he drops that far. No chance he drops that far, is there? There can't be.
Even if you don't work out, like who would care for a 5th round pick, even if you didn't work out? Because that would be a fantastic project to work with. I saw a draft today that had us at number 2 taking Carson Strong. That's how far and wild these are right now. Carson Strong at number 2, the least mobile quarterback in the top 10 rankings, basically. Like, things are getting wild.
I like Carson, but like I was saying to Taib on chat the other day, I've got a valuation on my quarterbacks and I'm not going up for them. There's a valuation and that's where I'm sticking because that's what this draft is. It's not the draft to be trading up for a guy unless he slides. Absolutely not. But, you know, we'll move it on because we've still got a few games to go through. And moving on from one team in UNC who can't keep the points out of their end zone. They keep giving up a lot. This is another team who are fun to watch, and we mention them every week, but they physically can't stop teams scoring points against. I can't remember the last time they conceded less than 40 points. And this is Wake Forest. They managed to sneak a win out this weekend. This was a wonderful game to watch. North Carolina State have become a favourite team of mine since they gave us Aleem McNeil. I was looking forward to this game. It didn't disappoint. Wake Forest snuck this in the end. They won 45 points to 42, but once again, they gave up over 40 points. They don't do things the easy way. There has to be some form of offensive movement about them because they can't stop conceding points. But this one was really interesting because North Carolina State scored a touchdown with 45 seconds to go. And Wake Forest, for me, got incredibly lucky here because they went for the onside kick, NC State did. And they recovered it in my eyes. They did the little squib kick and they got it back, but it was ruled as being caught at the 9-yard line past the kick. Obviously, it has to go 10 yards, but I thought it was incredibly debatable as to whether it was or not. It would have given at least enough time for North Carolina State to go and get a field goal and take it into overtime. But Wake Forest got lucky, and they needed to because this end-of-season run for them is horrific. North Carolina State are a really good side, but this is a big win for them. Maybe a tiny bit undeserved, but, win by any means necessary.
Yeah, if anyone listened to the pod last week, I said this was the game that would decide title credentials. Wake Forest now have one hand on the ACC championship game. They hold all their own fate. NC State were 8-2. They were 9-1. This was a game that neither team could lose. And arguably, this was Sam Hartman's worst game of the year. I'm pretty sure he threw 3 interceptions. I think he had an absolute stinker. For someone that we pride on looking after the ball so well and keeping it, he was very generous. He kept them in this game all the way. We know they've got a very leaky defense. Another week conceding more than 35 points. But I'm pretty sure they're still like a team that I think they've had to score 35 plus points in every game of the year now to win. And that just tells you that this defense does not have the legs in it for the long haul. And now Clemson could be a huge party pooper in that next game. Like they hold all the spoils. They could really upset Wake Forest. They are someone for me. I don't know how much I've really lost trust in Wake Forest. Like they're so there, but they're also so far. They could really royally screw this up. I don't want them to, but I think, like Simon said last week, that losing Field, the running back who went off with a foot injury in the boot, it was a huge loss. They just can't control the clock. Like I said, they're leaving teams chances. I agree. I would have liked to see him re-kick the onside kick, challenge it or something, because it was a very harsh call. It would have given them a chance to take it to overtime. But sometimes just things go your way like that. You can't always rely on officials' help and then measuring things like that. And they fell very short. But Wake Forest can consider themselves very lucky, because I remember last week, the last game they won, they scored a touchdown very late and they went for a short kickoff instead of a long one, and they gave up a score and then they put themselves in trouble again. So they're having real trouble sealing out these games. And in the end, you just feel like this is going to really come back to bite them at the most crucial point of the year, because right now they can't afford slip-ups.
No, I can't see them going far in bowl games or championship games. Just that defense gives up too many points. When you said they've got to score more than 35 every week, you've got to give Sam Hartman a break eventually. He can't keep putting up these sort of numbers week in, week out, and winning the game. Because again, this was one that Wake Forest were winning, quite late on by a couple of scores, but they were still throwing it. This week, he threw 47 passes or attempted 47 passes. He had like nearly 60 the other week. He only completed 20 this week, so he was well below 50% accuracy with his passing. He did throw for 290 yards. You're right, he got 3 interceptions. He did throw 3 touchdowns as well, and he got a rushing touchdown, but I think that's fatigue setting in there for him. 3 picks is not like him. He puts up big numbers and doesn't usually turn the ball over that often. The backup running back, Justice Ellison, he got 3 touchdowns on the day, 2 rushing, 1 receiving. So he filled in pretty well for his senior partner there. A.T. Perry, 73 yards of the touchdown. They got a couple of picks. They got a couple of sacks. On NC State's side, Devin Leary, their quarterback, he had an even busier day. 37 passes completed out of 59 attempts, nearly 60 passes for him for the day, 408 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So it was a gunfight. 5 picks got thrown altogether. The ball was just in the air all the time. They only rushed it for 76 yards. That's where NC State fell down. Their running game just didn't help out, and they were too far behind for a lot of it to really make something of it. But the receivers, they had their fill. Emeka Emezie, 133 yards, 2 touchdowns. Devin Carter, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns. Their defense, considering they gave up so much, did all right. They got 4 sacks. They got 3 interceptions. And Zonovan Knight, the kick returner, another one who had a good day, 3 returns, 194 yards and a touchdown. So it was a good day for kick returners. But yeah, you've got to feel Sam Hartman must be burnt out to hell by now, the amount of work they give him to do every single week.
Yeah, he will be fatiguing, surely. He's going to turn around at some point and think like, come on, guys, you got to give me a chance. You've got to help me get off the field or give me at least someone to hand off to, because the backup running back did okay, but he still felt like he had all the pressure in the world on him. And also, this is going to hurt when he does declare for the draft, because quarterbacks that have got a lot of miles on the clock and have done a lot of work, sometimes they actually get overlooked. It's hard to, you ain't going to be slinging it this much in the NFL, so we don't really know what he's going to be like as a pro. Can he do this against pro defenses? Probably not. Maybe he's very overrated at the next level. I guess it's hard to see, but it's a shame for NC State, because if they'd have won that, they'd have had a hand on the ACC title game. So unfortunately, that was the killer loss for them that ended their year. But it's going to be interesting to see if Wake Forest can sneak over the line. They've done all the hard work now. Just don't screw it up.
Well, we'll talk about their fixture later in the preview, but I've got a bad feeling for them this weekend. It's just the wrong team to be coming up against at the wrong time. Moving on, because there's still a lot of games in here. So a team we haven't talked about much this year, but mainly because after an early blip, they've been whooping guys' asses every single week. This is Ohio State. We highlighted their game against Purdue last week. I very foolishly said that Purdue could possibly win this if Karlaftis got into the game, started putting Stroud under pressure and was able to nullify that offense. Well, were they hell? Ohio State won this 59 points to 31. This is not a bad Purdue side, and that is not a bad defense. And Ohio State have put up basically a 60 burger on them. This offense is getting absolutely frightening in the level of its ability. Everyone came to the party today. CJ Stroud, his year just continues to go from strength to strength. 31 of 38, 361 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, just a clean game for him. They had 2 almost Centurion running backs. Mian Williams got 117 rushing yards. Travion Henderson, the breakout freshman, 98 yards, 2 touchdowns for him, another great day. And then the trifecta of receivers. They have 3 of the best receivers in college at the moment, probably the deadliest trio of them all. Jackson Smith and Jigba, 139 yards and a touchdown. Garrett Wilson on my 5 to watch list this year, 10 receptions, 126 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he also rushed one time for 51 yards and another touchdown. So that was 177 yards and 4 touchdowns for him for the day, which was an incredible effort, and it's just made me love him even more than I did before. And then not forgetting Chris Olave, 9 for 85 and a touchdown. Just to put it in perspective, after those 3 guys, the next receiver who got the most yards got 4 yards. It's just them 3, and they just absolutely wreck teams for the hell of it. And the defense, not a single sack, not a single pick, but hell, it doesn't matter. That offense just feels like it could be. I think some NFL teams could probably be in danger with the way this offense is going currently.
I agree. Like, we're not mentioning who, because we know probably who we know who did give us the fright. I think the sign of the best teams are the teams that can start slow, but then they get hot at just the right time. And Ohio State right now, they're boiling. They're almost combusting. They're that hot. They've hit their groove just at the right time. They're getting towards booking their spot in the playoffs. It's hard to see them right now because they're rolling over teams. It's hard to see them not just sitting out the season, going over teams. And CJ Stroud, you can bookmark this. He's already my favourite for the 2022 Heisman. You can put him up there as the favourite for next year already, because this young man has. I thought the start year it might be a bit too big for him. This job might be too big for the man, but he looks like he's a veteran already. He's commanding an offense. Don't get me wrong, it's full of stars, but they're still very young men. Smith and Jigba, I think, is a sophomore. Got Travion Henderson, freshman. But then you've got the 2 senior guys. You've got Wilson or Olave that will be gone next year, so they're going to have to reload. But the defense did what it had to do. It bent and it didn't break. They got off the field, and then explosive plays after explosive plays for the huge, high-powered offense. And Ryan Day is going to be in line for another Coach of the Year award. 3 years, still only lost 3 games, has about 30 wins. He is just ticking over nicely where the old head coach left off. And they're getting scary now, Ohio State. Even if they slip into the playoffs at like 3 or 4, you sure as hell aren't going to want to play them. And Purdue played their game, but they fell too behind too quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Purdue didn't really do much wrong. Obviously, defensively, they struggled, but I think everyone's struggling against this offense. Aidan O'Connell, he had a good game, 390 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. That's a good game for a quarterbacks, and against them as well. That's good fun for him. David Bell continued his season. He had 103 yards on 11 carries, so another 100-yard plus game for him. Jackson Anthrop, he's had a good last few games. He got 2 touchdowns, 66 yards. So you can't really put anything on Purdue there. It's just they came up against the team who were in form. But I'm going to say it till the cows come home. I want to see Georgia versus Ohio State tomorrow. That has to be, right now, the championship game. I want to see that front 7 of Georgia get stuck into this offense of Ohio, because they're both elite at what they do. Pure and simple. This is unstoppable force versus immovable object. And I'm really, really curious to see who wins, because that Georgia defense is going to have to step up big time, because, their offense is good, but it doesn't traditionally hand out whippings very often, not like 60, 70 points. And this Ohio State offense might mean you have to put up that many points to beat them. But, I think for me, I don't know about you about the championship game, but I want to see that one right now.
Well, if you can't look at rankings, we're going to see it very soon, because they could be the 1st and 4th seed, which sounds criminal. They're kind of like the best offense and the best defense could be in the semi-finals of the playoffs. It doesn't sound like they're going to actually be able to meet in the final unless something changes between now and then. And that's kind of sad. Like I said, I would love to see, because you've even got the Georgia secondary, you've got Kelly Ringo, you've got Louis Sain. He's a nice safety. Like, they're playing well on the back end. And then you've got this high-powered offense for Ohio State. Great offensive line. CJ Stroud couldn't ask for any better protection as a freshman. They keep him upright and clean every game. One concern is I think that Ohio State will be upset about the back end, the defense. They gave up a lot of yards to Purdue on that quarterback. They won't be happy. It's not often that people pass for over 400 yards on Ohio State defense. So they will be upset about that.
I think that's the big weakness is against the pass. They're very susceptible to that. So, if you can meet a team who is, trouble is not many teams possess a good enough defense, even if they've got the offense, they just can't outscore them. And there are not many teams that have the defense that can stop them. Like I say, I think Georgia can, but I would question their offense's ability to be able to put massive points on them as well. They do like to run it a bit as well, but it's going to be fascinating. I just want them to play each other. I don't want them to be drawn apart and one of them lose. I want to see that fixture, and I want to see it yesterday. So, we'll see, but we're like.
Just one thing. If Ohio State and Oregon replayed tomorrow and Oregon still had Thibodeau, I think Ohio State would blitter them. I think they would destroy Oregon if they played them again. Even at full strength with Thibodeau, they won't stand a chance. Oregon just caught them on a bad week.
I think Stroud we said it first few weeks, he looked uncomfortable. He didn't throw it that much, but he was missing a lot of his passes, and he just looked like he was, a guy starting his first few games. But 3 or 4, all it took was 3 or 4 games, a bit of confidence, and the world's his oyster now. And if they can replace Wilson and Olave, then I'm with you. He's up there for Heisman in 2022 already, because not a lot of teams are going to be able to stop him going forwards. TreVeyon Henderson he could probably be up there for the Heisman as well, for all we know. He could just put up that sort of season. Anyhow, we're going to move through a few more, because there's still a few more games to go, and we've been going a while. So we're going to stop in with an old mate of yours now. Ole Miss, they were playing Texas A&M. This was a ranked fixture. Texas A&M been a lot better recently. Ole Miss bit inconsistent at times, but still a good side. We wondered who was going to win, but once again, Matt Corral comes out on top. He has a decent week. He doesn't throw a pick. He just seems to be doing just enough now to, with all the other quarterbacks in flux, he's slowly just working his way up to the top. 247 yards and a touchdown for him this week. Jerrion Ealy, the running back, he had 186 all-purpose yards. Great day for him. Dontario Drummond, he got the receiving touchdown. Of course, he always scores receiving touchdowns. You can't keep him out of the action at all. And the defense got a couple of picks in there as well. Texas A&M, we saw the Zach Calzada we know and love from those first few weeks, the one that didn't look like he knew what he was doing very much. He'd had a great few weeks, but just 237 yards this week, 2 picks, no touchdowns thrown. Isaiah Spiller had a very quiet week, just 41 yards. Their other guy, Akane, he got 110 yards and 2 touchdowns in the rushing game, but not a lot going in the receiving game there for them. Matt Corral's he can't really have asked for a better season, I don't think, the way it's gone. The picks have been limited. He's shown up in the big games for the most part, and his stock's really going through the roof at the minute.
I think it's no surprise that he hasn't thrown for a lot of yards. I think the old Matt Corral used to force throws, he used to like the highlights, he used to want 3,000-4,000 yards in a year. But this year he's thought about reining it in a little bit, which means less mistakes, but it also means less yardage. So the numbers are deceiving. He's playing in a very clean offense. He's not up there in all the stats, but as he's steadily making ground, the other quarterbacks around him are sliding. He is benefiting from the other people that are struggling around him because he's just ticking over nicely. He's run the ball really well this year as well. He's rushed. He's taken some big hits in games. He's looked good when he's had to take off and tuck and run. We said last week that Ole Miss's kryptonite was the run game, and they proved us right, didn't they? 150 plus yards rushing on Texas A&M's offense, kept them in the game. We thought Spiller might take over, but Sam Williams, one of the star edge players in football, he showed up again. Good front from Ole Miss, managed to shut down a run. They got interceptions again. I can't remember his name. It's there's a safety that's playing really well. He's got quite a few interceptions on the season. And that's it. Zach Calzada, this was not the week when he wanted to go back to his old self. This is when he kind of needed to show his most and pull up his big boy pants. But unfortunately, he let the side down, gave the ball away, and he made, in the end, the job very easy for an Ole Miss side that didn't have to do a lot to put this team away. very comfortable in the end.
Yeah, it was a bit surprising. You thought Texas A&M were on a roll. They looked a lot better than they did at the start of the season, but I think, just a bit of old habits die hard in this one. A few of those mistakes came back to haunt them again, but, they were never seriously going to do much this season. So, maybe they found a few more guys for next year with this form, etc. You would expect to see them bounce back, especially if Haynes King is back and starting under centre. But I've seen some discussions taking place saying that there's going to be a competition between them two now, which I'd still feel like King's the better guy, but we could be shocked. Could you see him losing that starting job, even if they both stay?
It's his to lose. I think at the end of the year, he will revert back to quarterback number one because there was so much hype around the season. But he'll be on a very short leash. If week one next season he doesn't deliver, he'll be back on the bench and Calzada will be thrown in again. But it's got the margins between them have shrunk a lot this year. And that's only because of injury, unfortunately. Like, that's not because of bad play, but Calzada's doing well. This is an interview, and he's looked okay. So you didn't think he'd get this chance, and he's delivering. He's keeping him in games where he can. So I applaud the young man for having a good crack at it. And if not, he might have to transfer next year, but he might find a starting gig somewhere.
You never know. He's shown bits this year, so someone might have a go at him. Maybe a UConn. Who could see that happening? They need a quarterback. You never know. Stranger things have happened. Anyhow, we'll move it on, and we'll move it on to the team who we love to disappoint us. We like it when they disappoint us because they are a bad side who we like to hate on a little bit. And this is Auburn. They were playing Mississippi State this week. I think we both called upsets on this last week because neither of us trust Auburn as far as we can throw them. They were actually 28-10 up at halftime, and you're thinking, oh, well, maybe, ranked team, unranked team, they're showing what they're all about. But then they came out in the second half and they got absolutely obliterated. And Mississippi State ended up winning 43 points to 34. Somehow, I don't know how they came back from it, especially when you've got Tank Bigsby and you're 18 points up. You would expect to win a game pretty easy, but they somehow, failed to deliver on that. Will Rogers, the quarterback for Mississippi State, he was sort of the guy for them that day. He's another who's had a bit of a hit and miss year sometimes, but this was one of his great days. 415 yards, 6 touchdowns. It was 44 of 55. Busy day for him. Bo Nix, he had a good day, 377 yards, 2 touchdowns. Unfortunately, did get injured. Bigsby, he had a quiet one, only 41 rushing yards. Mississippi State were able to keep him pretty quiet, but he did get 2 touchdowns. Kobe Hudson got 8 for 107 and a touchdown. And Javarius Johnson, he had 177 all-purpose yards and a touchdown on the day for Auburn. And they got a few sacks in there as well. But once again, Auburn disappoint, and it's become an expected thing by now. They shouldn't really be losing this from the position they were in at the half against the team they were facing.
No, when you've got a commanding lead at the half, you can't use losing Bo Nix as an excuse. Some people want to use that as an excuse. They'll say the heads dropped when he went off, but things weren't great for, like say, Tanks Bigsby held under 50 yards. That Ole Miss front seven really held their own. They put the onus on Bo to take the game to them. And he was doing a good job. Until he went down, he was doing a good job. And they got into the half, like I said, they had this comfortable 18-point lead. They must have felt too comfortable because they came out and they looked lackluster. They looked like all their energy had gone, all their motivation, and they were really disappointing. And Will Rogers is such a weird quarterback. The guy's got like 3,500 passing yards. He's the definition of boom or bust. 6 touchdowns this week. But I watched him play LSU. He was terrible. He throws a lot of interceptions in some games as well. You do not know which guy is going to turn up. Sometimes you get surprised. Good Will Rogers, like this week, turns up and he torches that Auburn secondary. And then some weeks he'll go for 3-4 interceptions and he'll dig them in a hole they can't get out of. It's just they're so hot and cold. And he just got hot. He rode the hot hand in the second half. They put a bit of a fire under him, and they capitalised on a depleted Auburn side that lost Nix. That was extra motivation for them to see out the game. And then they rattled off scores very quickly because they kept getting the ball back, forcing punts, turnover on downs, because the team that lost its quarterback couldn't run the ball. Then when those two things collide, it's a combination. It's a bit of a disaster, really.
Yeah, I think Auburn just need this season to end, really, don't they? And just regroup, because it's gone all here, there, everywhere, all over the place. And now it's just, you can't be losing that one, even with the quarterback injury. A lot of the teams have had to deal with it. They didn't deal with it so well. And when you've got one of the best running backs in the entirety of the FBS, you should be using him more, or you should be at least trying to get him involved in the game. 41 rush yards from him is not anywhere near enough when you're that far in front. At least try and bring the clock down and make them panic a bit. But hey ho, just a few more games I want to go through, and then any more that you might want to now. I want to quickly mention Nevada here. They lost to San Diego State this week, 23-21. But my guy had a good week. I'm a Carson Strong fan. Like I say, I've got a valuation on him in the draft, but I want him to be here. He went 34 of 48 through 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. It was a pretty much flawless game from him. And then at wide receiver, Romeo Doubs. We're starting to hear more about him, especially in Lions circles. He got 9 receptions for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, I'm going to drop this question on you out of the blue here, Ryan. I'll see what you come up with. But for me, if I'm picking a pair of players from the same team in this draft, I'm picking Carson Strong and I'm picking Romeo Doubs. What would your combination from a team be if you'd like 2 players to be here from the same team? Who automatically comes to mind for you?
That's hard.
See, I thought you'd have gone straight with Corral and Drummond, but
I thought about that, but I don't see the value in Drummond in a stack. I think I'd go Thibodeau and McKinley. I think I'd take the edge and I'd take a safety because I feel like they're needs and they'd look really good.
Oh, interesting. But yeah, I just wanted to get that in there. Big Carson Strong fan, so, another good week for him. And hopefully, he's going to have a good positioning in the draft and good value for us. I know we're not really looking at quarterbacks at the minute, what media's saying, but hopefully they are looking at them in the background. We'll quickly go through the Michigan teams. MSU, Michigan State Spartans, they came back with a bang this week. They were playing Maryland and Taulia Tagovailoa, and you were wondering, well, when that offense shows up, it can put some points down. They're going to be vulnerable after the defeat last week. Are they going to lose this one? But they came back quite comprehensively here. They won 40-21. Peyton Thorne back to his usual self. 287 yards, 4 touchdowns, just 1 pick thrown. Kenneth Walker, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns. His race for the Heisman continues. And Jaden Reed, 114 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. Back to business for them, and they've got a massive fixture coming up this week, and they needed this win, especially in the run-up to it.
Yeah, this was big. This was just for confidence. They had to bounce back. They had to get the offense ticking again, and that makes the loss to last week just look like a blip. They put it in the back of their memory already. You move on to next week. Say a Maryland team that can be dangerous. Let's say you got Taulia, and then you've got a great room of wide receivers that can score quickly, but also they give you chances because Maryland turned the ball over a lot. But it was a clinical job. Like, someone would have seen them as vulnerable, but they got it done. They didn't scare any injuries, like they didn't lose anyone. So it was a clean day at the office, and they can look past that to the biggest game of the year, which got everything on the line.
Yes, does it not half? Are there any other games you want to highlight this week? Ones you watch? I do have still a list here, but I'm bearing in mind that we do have a time limit for this. So is there anything else that really caught your eye this week?
I'll just talk about the Pac-12, Oregon.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot completely and utterly about that. I was going to mention Utah, but no, carry on. You go Pac-12.
Oregon, they didn't look great against a Utah team that are pretty good. They certainly held their own. Like, Oregon got past them with the score, but I think Utah found a new quarterback in Charlie Rising, I think his name is. They were in that game for a good majority of it, but I was glad because I needed a Utah loss. So, and I needed to couple that with Arizona State, who I said vocal last week I thought would lose because Washington were a bit of a mess off the field, but we were the nail in the coffin. Rashad White is now the back-to-back Pac-12 Offense Player of the Week, our senior star running back, who is a draft sleeper potentially. He's nearly 6'2", nearly 400 rushing yards in the last 2 weeks. Jane Daniels had another bad week. I think that's 2 games, no touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So he's really killing us. We squeaked out of that 135-30. But my player to watch at the start of the year, Merlin Robinson, linebacker, had a pick 6, which is always good. We ran the ball down a Washington team that had no Olafosio, and that's a big loss for them. We just have to run the ball. That's our strength. But no, we're back in almost in the driving seat in the Pac-12 South. We're coming up with another big game, but all to play for in the Pac-12 right now in that South Division because it is stacked. And Utah and ASU are fighting for that conference title game. It's going to go down to the wire. We've got a massive game coming up against a really underrated team. But no, all things went well this weekend.
Yeah, and that good for them. There's like you said, there's a couple big ones coming up this week. There's that many teams still in contention in there that it's just throwing up lots of intriguing fixtures at the end of the year. It's one of the most fascinating leagues probably at the minute, just because of how open it is, and there's just no clear favourite, and that could change again this weekend. Just to round off a few other results that were there, the Wolverines beat Penn State 21-17. That was a big test for them. They came through that. They took down James Franklin's run defense. Arkansas slayed LSU. That's technically not an upset, but usually it might be. That was 16-13. That was quite a low-scoring game, which was surprising. And then Coastal Carolina lost to Georgia State, but that was sans Grayson McCall, who is out injured at the minute, which is a shame. But Georgia State took that 42 points to 40. I watch all their games. It's odd watching them without Grayson McCall. They're not as good. Well, I say they're not as good. They put up 40 points. I just like him that much. I like to see him play, and I'm disappointed when he doesn't. So, there are a few more big ones. But, that's pretty much it for the reviews this week of the games. As I say, there were a few more, but, we can only cover so many. And as always, we finish off the week's review by looking at the uniforms of the week. Ryan has a little look for the best and the brightest, and this was Salute to Service weekend, which usually you get some crackers delivered, some special uniforms out there, and they didn't disappoint. And me and Ryan are going to slightly disagree on the favourite because I really love his second choice, if it's still his second choice. If it isn't, we'll be having words. But over to you, Ryan. Give us the lowdown on the fashion scene of college football this week.
I've changed my choices, so actually I don't even know if I've got who you picked in here. I kind of went a bit rogue. Now, my number one, the winner, is South Florida. Now, they were the first game of the week on Thursday night. They brought out the Stars Spangled Banner white uniforms with gold numbers. You need to go look at them. Unfortunately, that's where it ends well because they got destroyed by Cincinnati. They shipped 42 points, but if you're going to play badly, at least look good. Now, I changed my number 2 because I didn't actually see them properly, but I went with the Kansas Jayhawks. Their uniforms were really nice. They had the red, white, and blue. It looked super patriotic. And then they had the Jayhawk on the helmet, and it had like hand-painted like rivets on the bill, like it was a bird. It looked really good. Now, this is a controversial one. People love this on Twitter. The worst uniform of the week. It's Michigan State. It's the puke neon green vomit uniforms. I don't care. They use them every year, and they are hideous. They've got that big stupid state banner, the neon and awful shades of green. They just make me want to sick. But no, there was a fantastic helmet as well. I think it was Louisiana Monroe. They had a helmet. I can't remember the name, but it was designed by a US bomber plane, and it had like a shark on it, like grinning its teeth, and it looked pretty mean and scary. So everyone go look at that ULM helmet this weekend. It looked like an actual taking off war plane. It looked great. But no, I've upset you, haven't I?
You have upset me, Ryan. I mean, I showed you this at the start of the week. This was another team who played on Thursday as well, and it looked great. It was UNC. That sick-looking white and blue uniform they have there. It looks like almost an Aquafresh type blue. It looked absolutely sick, absolutely amazing. And for me, that was my favourite one of the entire week. I thought it would get in your top two, and I'm disappointed, I must say. But you know what? It's out there. Go and see it. It looks amazing. It probably looks more amazing in the photos than it does on the pitch, but it's still really, really nice. I do appreciate USC for that one, but I agree with the Spartans one. It's not the best one. Don't get angry, Spartans fans, but we've given you a lot of praise over the season, a lot. So take a little bit of the criticism with it as well. So that's everything for the uniforms of the week. So yeah, South Carolina in there, Michigan State, some of the bad ones. You've got Kansas in there again. They've had a good week on the pitch and in the uniform competition. So do go and see them. But we're going to move over now to the Week 12 preview. We're getting towards the end of the season. Games are starting to take ever more significance here. Upsets are happening weekly. The college playoff football scene's changing. So let's have a look at some of the bigger ones we've got this week and maybe put some predictions down. So we did all right last week, I feel. We did have a few who let us down, but we also did pretty well. So the first one we've got Arkansas, ranked 25. They travel to Alabama, ranked number 2 now. This would be a big upset if Arkansas were to go there and win, but they took down LSU this weekend again. On the road. Or was it on the road? No, they were at home. But this would be KJ Jefferson versus Bryce Young. Is this a banana skin for Alabama, or is this just going to be a cakewalk?
I don't think it'll be a cakewalk, but I don't fear any issue with a potential upset. I think Arkansas will really hold their own. They almost beat Ole Miss. They gave themselves a really good account in that game as well, Ron Looker. Arkansas, they're not someone that gets blown out. They do really well to hold their own. Like you don't ever look at them and feel like, oh, they're a bad side. Like they'll score points. They got Jefferson. They got Treylon Burks. Whenever you've got a combination like that, it's going to be a really good test for that secondary because he's one of the best receivers that's come into town this year. But I expect them to win fairly comfortably.
Yeah, I'm probably with you on this. I'm a bigger Arkansas fan than most, mostly because I like Burks. But for me, unfortunately, when they've come into the big games this year, they've not delivered. And it's a shame, but it just is the way it is with them. I don't think the defense is going to be able to hang up. Bryce Young is having a great year, potential Heisman year. I also agree Alabama are going to win that. Now, this is the big one in the Pac-12 as regards to Arizona State and their chances of maybe winning the whole thing. So number 3 ranked Oregon travel to number 24 ranked Utah, the Utes. So obviously big ramifications here. Oregon winning the overall Pac-12 at the minute. Utah at the top of the South or joint top of the South with yourselves. Obviously, this is on Utah's home patch. They've had a really good year. They're probably, some may say, an underrated team. Can they upset Oregon?
Yes, they can upset Oregon. Utah are a really good team. They've got they've got a great pair of linebackers. They've got a very stingy defense that can take the ball away. They've got a quarterback that is finding his feet. He's a young man. They've replaced him well, and they're a very good, solid, efficient team. Now, Oregon, they don't impress me that often. I don't trust Anthony Brown because he's very blows hot and cold. I know they've got a strong defense that's likely to take the ball away, but I think this is a crunch game. It's not the biggest game on their roster, but for Utah it is because of how much is on the line. Oregon have got the Pac-12 North basically wrapped up with a bow on. But for the Pac-12 South, yeah, we are level. Arizona State, Utah must lose or we can't get that advantage back going. I think Utah, though, I think they're going to nick this one 28-23. This won't be high scoring. It's going to come down to possession, but I like Utah to upset them.
Oh, so the upset hat is on Utah this week. So, I am inclined to agree. I've not watched too much of them this year, but the results have been impressive. They've put away some really good teams really convincingly. Yes, they've lost a couple of bad ones, but like I say, Oregon they're a bit hit and miss. Anthony Brown, again, like I say, he's not necessarily known for his throwing of the ball when he runs a lot. and can just serviceably throw it, he seems dangerous. But on a day when you stop him running and you keep him in the pocket, he's average. And I think home advantage here is a big thing as well. I think if this was at Oregon, I'd probably go the other way. But I'm going to join you. I'm going to say Utah are going to win this one. And that's just going to throw open everything in the Pac-12 even further. Obviously, it's better for you guys if Oregon win, but you can only go with what you see. And I do agree, there is an upset there. Now, this is the biggie. As far as the Big Ten goes, we've mentioned it already. Number 7, Michigan State, traveling to number 4, Ohio State. So Kenneth Walker, potential Heisman guy. What better way for him to show that he deserves this Heisman unconditionally by leading the Spartans to victory in Ohio, in which would probably be one of the biggest shocks in some time. But if Tucker wants a signature win to start off what is presumably going to be a long reign for him here with this contract, this would be the place to start. And Peyton Thorne can throw. We've said the weakness is on their passing defense. But on the flip side, the Spartans' pass defense is absolutely atrocious. And when you're coming up against the best triumvirate of receivers in the game with a young quarterback who's only getting better week by week, I don't know. What do you see happening here? Is the fairy tale alive for Kenneth Walker, or are Ohio State just going to put them back down where they belong?
I think Kenneth Walker will have a very good game. I think they will struggle to stop him, but I think that's about as far as it. Michigan State will keep pace for a quarter or two, and Ohio State will then pull away. There's going to be no upset. I expect when all said and done, Ohio State win comfortably, but it's going to be a high-scoring game. I expect this to have a good 70, 80 points in it when all said and done, because we've just seen a Purdue side that weren't afraid to put points, throw the ball. Like David Bell, like I think Speedy Noyle got Jaden Reed, that those two could give some very good tests to the corners, because I don't rate the Ohio State cornerbacks or the secondary that good. I think they could have a field day. I think Ohio State will stack the box. They will try to take Kenneth Walker away. And I think realistically, Michigan State have to try to do the same. They have to take away Travion Henderson, make this a passing duel. They may have a chance if it's all passing, but I think it's just going to be too big. Stroud's arm will end up seeing them over the line.
I think the key is they've got to get Walker going, because if then Ohio State start to stack the box, then you've got two good receivers on Michigan State's side who then will have a little bit more space to operate against a vulnerable secondary. I think that's really going to be the key aspect there for them. But I'm with you. This is going to be a high scorer, but I'm going to up the ante even more. I reckon 90, possibly 100 points in this one. I genuinely do see two weak secondaries against the pass, and I see that, teams are going to be there to exploit it. But I'm not counting Michigan State out. We've counted them out a few times this year, and they just, they've got a lot of heart in that team. They're playing with a lot of spirit, togetherness. Walker, I think, is going to have a good game. I'm going something along the lines of 60-40 to Ohio State, but they're going to keep pace for a good part of it. And I think they'll do themselves proud. I know giving up 60 is never a good thing, but I think against this Ohio State offense, you're going to give up points. I think that's a given at this point. You've just got to try and keep your own offensive game going. But, if Michigan State were to win this, then they're playoff bound. They have to be. A signature victory like that. And I think I'd stamp Kenneth Walker's name on the Heisman. If he comes away with 150 yards and 2 touchdowns and they win, I'm plating it on there now. I don't care what Bryce Young does. That'll just be something phenomenal as far as they go. So, yeah, I think we both agreed Ohio State win in a high-scoring game, but Michigan State will do themselves proud. I don't think there'll be no shame in the defeat they take. This now is an interesting one. I've put this in here. SMU, they're traveling to Cincinnati, one of the few undefeated teams left. Now, I've put this in here because I know Tanner Mordecai, one of your favorite quarterbacks in college. That SMU offense can put up points when they want to, and Cincinnati have struggled against teams this year, especially worse teams than SMU. I know Cincinnati have home field advantage, but do you see SMU sneaking a win here possibly? Or at least it's not going to be an easy assignment for Ridder and those Bearcats?
I think Cincinnati will win this one very closely because for all of Tanner Mordecai and SMU's great play, they give the ball away. And that's one thing Cincinnati don't do. They don't give the ball away often. Mordecai can be a bit twitchy. You will get chance at interceptions. You're going against South Gardner, the best cornerbacks in the country, but they've got offensive weapons, SMU, but they do concede a lot of points. I saw that when I watched them against Houston. So I think if Ridder is more efficient and the defense capitalizes, I think this should be a close win for Cincinnati. But I think SMU will play their part in it and they'll put up a big yardage. I think this is a real test. This is one of the harder games this year for Cincinnati, but I'd like to think they just get over the edge if they capitalise on turnovers, because there will be turnovers.
Yeah, I'm low-key looking forward to this one. I think it's going to be a good test. It's going to be a good stage for Ridder to be on. It's going to be a good stage for Mordecai to be on. I'd like to see a bit of a shootout, in all honesty, but that Bearcats defense really good. It has to be. So I see what you mean. There could be a point where they turn it over a bit too much and they win a bit easier. But I'll go with the Cincinnati win, but I'm also going with a very fun game. So, yeah, Cincinnati for that one for me as well. Now, Wake Forest, we mentioned them earlier in their ACC title credentials. Ranked 12th, but this week they head to Clemson, and Clemson, because they've really been put out of contention this season, no one's really kept an eye on them these last few weeks, but I have, and they're slowly getting better. They seem to be finding their identity at last. They've got Will Shipley back at running back, which has helped the offense operate better. That defense, for me, that's the game changer here. We were talking about Sam Hartman earlier, his high workload, getting fatigued, them relying on him too much. One thing this Clemson defense have done this season, even when they've lost, is keep the points tally low. It's a good defense. They've got a good pair of linebackers in there. They've got a decent pass rush, guys who are going to get after Sam Hartman. This is a very difficult fixture for them, and they're on the road as well. What are your thoughts on this one?
See, it's two teams that totally contradict each other, because one team wants to score as many points as they can, and one team is built to keep them out. Clemson isn't built to score right now. Like I say, they rely on Will Shipley, but poor quarterback play, average wide receiver play, they're not able to get 20, 25 points consistently. They're struggling. Whereas you can expect a team that's put 35 plus every single week, but Clemson have nothing to lose. They've got a little bit to gain. There's a chance they sneak into a title game, but they need things to go their way. Wake Forest have got everything to lose. Can they deliver on a big stage? Will they get stage fright? Will they ask Sam Hartman to throw again 50 times? Because the linebackers at Clemson, they're going to take away that run game. Like say Spectre and Skolsky, they're going to stack the box. They've got a good front. They're going to make Sam Hartman throw that ball a lot. They're going to try and get after him. I think Wake Forest are going to win in overtime. I think this one is going to go back and forth, and the person that's got the ball last will probably get there, but I don't think this will be a high-scoring game either. This could be like the Wake Forest. This could be like that Clemson NC State game. I think it's going to follow a very similar path to that.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah. I just don't think this is a good matchup for Wake. I know that offense is one of the highest powered going, but that Clemson defense shuts out teams, shuts out really good sides. They don't give up many points. And I just think they're going to get after Sam Hartman, to which you say they're winning this one clearly. It's just not the best matchup. And I don't. And home advantage as well. I think Clemson are just getting better. They're at home. They need a few good wins to end the season well. This will be one for them. Talking to someone who does need a good game, though, Hartman's had a really good season. Malik Willis, he had an absolutely shocking game last time out against Ole Miss. He got harassed all day, threw a lot of picks, didn't do much good in the passing game. He has a chance to redeem himself slightly. Liberty are at home. They're facing Louisiana Lafayette, the Raging Cajuns. They are ranked and they are no mugs as a team. This is a good side, and Malik Willis is going to be able to have an opportunity to put that bad performance to bed with a good one here. How do you see this one going? Obviously, Liberty have home advantage, but this is a big team coming their way. They're a good side on their day. and Malik Willis has been unpredictable. You know, he's had 3 games this season with 3 picks. Not thrown any other picks this year, but the games he's been bad, and they tend to be in the high pressure situations.
I think Liberty are going to lose comfortably. I expect Louisiana to be all over them. I think Malik Willis is on a skid, and it's not going to end this week. He might get some good rushing yards, but I expect him to have another bad day passing the ball. This is not going to be the week where he redeems himself. He's really hurting himself lately. Like, a lot of people have gone totally off the boil, totally off of him. I think Liberty offensive line, like how many sacks did he eat in that Ole Miss game? They know full well that the way you beat him is pressure, because what he does is he doesn't eat sacks. He tries to throw the ball away when he shouldn't do. He throws very ill-advised interceptions. So I think if they send the house and get after him, that is the recipe for beating Liberty by probably a few scores. I think this is going to be a bad week for them. It's a bad matchup, and Louisiana are getting them just at the right time, and they're gonna go after him.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree that Louisiana win. I think it's going to be a tight game. I think Willis is going to do better, but I think the team around him is not good enough to hang with a team like Louisiana. I think that's where he's going to come down. And as you said, his offensive line, like Sam Howell's, is trying to get him killed. Doesn't seem necessarily that big. I don't know why, but Liberty seem like quite a small team. A lot of their players seem quite small in stature and not big, and seem to be out-muscled a lot. So, yeah, I agree. Louisiana in that one. Next up, this was the game Oklahoma were meant to lose if they were going to lose one this year because of their easy schedule. Iowa State traveled to Oklahoma. Now, Iowa State just came off a bad loss to Texas Tech, who've only just changed their head coach. It was 41-38. You know, they just don't seem to be getting anything going this year. But on their day, they're still a dangerous team. They've still got Reece Hall there. You know, when Purdy wants to show up, he does show up. The defense can be decent when it wants to be. But they're traveling to Oklahoma. 2 losses in a row for Oklahoma, or Iowa State just not good enough to hang with them this year?
No, Iowa State are nowhere near good enough. Brock Purdy sucks. This was supposed to be the year that they were supposed to make the playoff. Everyone had them winning their championship. He has looked a shadow of his former self. And I think Oklahoma are actually going to bounce back in a big way, and I think they're going to batter Iowa State. I think Caleb Williams is going to redeem himself. He should get the job. He should get the chance to prove he is the guy. And I expect Oklahoma to win this game very comfortably. Even though a good Breece Hall will have, he now is joint. He's now got the joint record games for rushing touchdowns. He's got 22 straight games. He's going to set the record. He's going to have 100 plus yards easily. He'll do his best, but in a losing effort, because Brock Purdy's going to suck again.
That's the thing. It's hard to make a prediction with them because you don't know what team's going to show up. You know, on the day, they're a really good side. I mean, I don't know. It's a weird one. I did want to put an upset on this because I do believe in Breece Hall, and I don't think that Sooners defense is anything clever. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I'm taking the safe option. Believe Oklahoma win this one, and again, quite easy. I think they're going to have a point to prove, and they can't afford to lose again. Otherwise, you know, that does a lot. You know, that's bad for their season. That knocks them right down. Probably knocks them down in the bowl significancy as well in terms of the game they get there. So that's going to be the last thing they want. So yeah, Oklahoma to beat Iowa State. I had another one here at the end because Ash listens to us all the time, and we have to put Florida State in there somewhere because there's not much good going on there this year. They've won a few games recently, and they've got Johnson in there who had 3 sacks this week, which was good for him. But outside of that, there's not a lot we can talk about. So this week they travel to Boston College. I have Boston College winning by about 30. Ryan?
I'm going to actually back Florida State. What I saw from them last week is I feel like a Jordan Travis now under center that has kind of got it. He's kind of like, he's realized he's the guy. He had the ball really well. As you say, Jermaine Johnson, the guy is on fire. He's probably now maybe going in the first round, and he's the only guy on that team that really has looked like doing anything all year. They've been so insignificant. But Boston College for me, since they lost Jerkovic and the star receiver, Zay Flowers, I think he's back now. But other than that, they've really struggled. I know they've got a great offensive line, but this is going to be a real test because Florida State bring pressure. They rack up sacks even across the board because they've got a good defensive front. And I think it's going to be a really ugly game. This is going to be a crappy game. It's not going to be pretty, but Florida State seem to like those at the moment. And Mike Norvell is kind of coming good late on. So I'm going to take Florida State in an upset in a low-scoring, scrappy, shitty contest. But it should be fun to watch.
Yeah, in case you were listening, Ash, I was joking with the 30-point thing, but I still think Boston College are going to win. But I agree with Ryan. It's not going to be a pretty game. I think home advantage decides this one. I just don't trust Florida State. I think they're good, but they can just be bad on any given week. And I feel like this is, in Boston College, when Jurkovic went down, I thought that season was done, but they seem to still be churning out results. I know they've not had a great season, but they've done a lot better than I expected them to. Before we finish on this one, are there any other fixtures really that caught you? I mean, I guess we'd have to go through Arizona State first. I mean, where are they this weekend? I can't exactly remember where they are.
We've got a big game against Oregon State, who are second in the Pac-12 North. They're behind Oregon, so they're trying to cling on to some hope of making a title game of their own. And I think I can see us losing. They're a really well-drilled unit. They've got a good offense, got great defense. Are we going to have 3 great weeks running the ball in a row? Because lately we've been 2 stop-start. So I'm going to say that we let ourselves down again and we end our campaign on a title run and fall into bowl obscurity. So I'm going to say Oregon State win, probably by a few because we keep turning the ball over. We just cannot keep the ball.
I think it all comes down to that running game, doesn't it? I think the last few weeks they've kept Jaden Daniels out the game to their benefit. They've ran it more and they've stopped him from turning it over as much. But you say Oregon State are just one of those sides. They are well drilled, and if they can keep the running game in check and you force it on Daniels, there is an opportunity for them there. But I don't know. I'm going to go home field advantage. I'm going to give you guys the win in that, but I'm not confident in the slightest because they're just 2 teams, like I say, on the day. You can get anything for them there. But are there any other games you've got your eye on this weekend? It's gone through a few of the bigger ones there. But again, a lot of the ranked teams are playing FCS schools and that this week. So there's going to be a lot of big blowouts going as well.
No, I feel like games kind of calm down this weekend a bit. I feel like there's the big games and then there's a big drop off to the rest.
Yeah, I think that's what I saw going through there. So, yeah, that's the preview for week 12. So those are some of the games you want to keep your eye on for that one. But I think which was the one I wanted? Yeah, SMU, Cincinnati. I think that could be quietly one of the best games of the week there. And also Michigan State. I'm going to be cheering them on. I'm going to say unashamedly, unbiasedly, I am rooting for them this season. So let's hope they can pull off the shock of all shocks in that one. So yeah, that's the week 12 preview done. Now Ryan has been taking a little look at the FCS this week. So obviously there's that much in college football. We're barely able to get through the FBS week by week because there's that much in there. And then when you include the FCS as well, it just goes on forever. But Ryan's been having a look at what's going on in there, some of the playoff implications, some of the better teams, players. So he's just going to give us a little lowdown of what's going on in the FCS now, what their playoff scene is like, because it is a bit different to the FBS there. So I'll pass this over to you, Ryan. What's going on in the land of the Division 2 or the lower division schools this year?
Yeah, they finish next week, so they start a little earlier. The FCS sides, it's already week 11 of 12 for them, so everyone's already played nearly 11 games. Their playoffs are totally different. They have 24 teams. Their playoffs start in 2-3 weeks' time. They have a quarterfinal, a semi-final, but they've also got a first round. So the 10 conference champions, they will all get a bye and they will miss the first week and get home field advantage. So, and then the 14 teams fill in. They're the best runners up from their conferences. So I'm having a look at their rankings right now. So last week to this week, the 1, 2, 3 have not changed. That is Sam Houston, the Bearcats, James Madison, the Dukes, who have accepted a deal to become an FBS team from 2023 onwards. So they're trying to leave on a high. And Montana State, they are the top 3 teams. You've got 9-0, 9-1, 9-1. So they're still top 3 this week. Then at 4, you've got a team that everyone knows. You've got the North Dakota State Bison. They're on the outside looking in. They were number 6 last week, but they're now also 9-1. You've got Kennesaw State at 9-1. You've got 9-1 teams also 8 and 10. So that tells you that 1 or 2 losses keeps you in the top 10 of the FCS playoff rankings right now. So those are the teams that are very much up there. Now, there are some conditions this week which lock up automatic bids. Let me just find it here. So Sam Houston State has already won their division's conference bid. So they have made the playoffs now, whatever happens, and they need to win this weekend and they will lock up number 1 and they will take home field advantage. They'll be the first team in that will get their bye week going. When you look in the Big Sky, you've got Montana State and Sacramento State. If Montana State win, they're already top, they're in. But if they lose and Sacramento State, they're the first team in and they can win the conference. So those 2 teams are hoping one of the other teams gets set up to lose because then it's going down to the final week. But those 2 should make the playoffs. You've got Kennesaw State. They will clinch their automatic FCS place if they beat Monmouth. Monmouth will also clinch a place if they beat Kennesaw State. So the winner automatically locks their place in, whereas the runner-up may be playing in the first week in the quarterfinals and won't get a bye. So everything to play for there in the Big Skies week. We've got Villanova. They win in week 12. They get their automatic bid. So they will be one of the 10 teams that get a week off. If it loses and James Madison loses as well, they still get in. That'll be off a head-to-head tiebreaker. And then we move into the Mountain Valley. We've got North Dakota State and South Dakota. If they both win, they get the automatic bid. But South Dakota does need help. North Dakota State does need to lose. And they can also grip the conference. So there's a 2 big rivals. You've got the 2 teams that hate one another. Like, I love watching Dakota football. They're some of the best teams. It's one of the biggest states. And the Mountain Valley Conference is easily one of the most competitive. And as we move down, in a Sacred Heart, they've just got 1 loss this year, and they will win the NEC with a win. UT Martin, they're down ranked 8th at 9-1. There's teams above them with 2 losses, but they have already won the OVC. That's the Ohio Valley Conference's automatic bid. So they're in. We move to the Patriot League, the Holy Cross. They have won their automatic bid already at 9-1, so they're in. So I'll go over these next week when I actually see who's planked where and who's going to be waiting the first matchup. We've got SoCon, we've got Mercer. If they defeat ETSU, they pinch the spot in the playoffs. Vice versa, ETSU, if they beat Mercer, they get the first automatic slot into the playoffs. So there's a lot of games this week. And UIW, I think that's Incarnate Word, which I love their name. They can win the Southland title with a win this week as well and book their points playoffs. So that is the first automatic scenarios this week where we will fill in the first 10 teams and the losers of those ties will try to fill in the next 14 who have to play in the quarterfinals. So this time next week, I will have a look at a bracket and I will see teams filled in there. But there's at least 10 to 15 teams that can book a playoff spot this week, and then everyone on the final week of the season will be on the outside looking in. It's very complex. They start their playoffs so early, but I love the FCS National Championship. I'm going to pin my hat on James Madison. I think because they're leaving the FBS and they've made a few national titles in the last few years, I think the Dukes are going to go out on a high. So if anyone's betting, that'll be my tip. And my last bit of news this week is the awards have been announced, the semi-finals. So every year we have lists for stars. You've got the Biletnikoff Award for the best wide receiver. You've got the Chud Bednarik Award for the best defender, the Dirk Walker Running Back Award, and the Davey O'Brien for the quarterback. So the semi-finals for wide receiver, you've got 10, you've got 18 for the defenders, 10 for the running backs, and you've got 20 quarterbacks. I believe on the 24th of November, these were broken down to their final lot, but I'm just going to run over some of the names. These are some of the lesser known guys to look for in the draft. There's also some big names here. You've got 10 wide receivers. You've got Jordan Addison from Pitt, David Bell, Jahan Dotson, Chris Olave, Josh Downs, Drake London. You've got A.T. Perry having an outstanding year at Wake Forest. You've got the receiving leader in the country, Jeref Stearns from Western Kentucky. And then the second receiving leader, Devin Tompkins from Utah State. There's 18 defenders, but there's too many to go through. So we've got Will Anderson. He's the defensive lineman from, I believe, Alabama.
Will Anderson.
Yeah. We've got Ahmad Sauce Gardner, the star corner from Cincinnati. Very own Jermaine Johnson, who got a Senior Bowl invite today. He's now on the list as the defensive end from Florida State. N'Kobe Dean, Aiden Hutchinson, you got Hamilton, Kayvon Thibodeau. You've got a safety as well in Jaquan Brisker. And you've got Kyle Aftis and Devin Lloyd, the only Pac-12 respondent. We've got 10 running backs in the semi-finals. You've got Tyler Algier, the star BYU running back. You've got Reece from Iowa State, Travion Henderson. You've got Sincere McCormack, the UTSA running back, who's having a fantastic year. You've got Kenneth Walker that can potentially wrap up a Heisman via Ohio State. You've got Sean Tucker, who is the leading rusher in the nation. He is the Syracuse back. You've got Bijan Robinson, and then you've got an outsider for me, Juice Vaughn, who is the Kent State running back. And I'll just fly through some quarterbacks.
Was there no Isaiah Spiller on that list?
He did not make the semi-final list now. They cut him out quarterfinal stage.
Wow.
And then running backs, we've got Brennan Armstrong. You've got Stetson Bennett, who's having a really nice year. I think he's the quarterback one for Georgia. You've got Matt Corral, Jake Hayner, which is nice to see, some group of 5 guys. You've got Howell, Grayson McCall, which is nice. Kenny Pickett, Ridder. You've got Will Rogers, who's having an up and down year, but he's putting up big numbers. You've got Strong. You've got CJ Stroud, Malik Willis, Bryce Young, and Bailey Zappi, who also made the Senior Bowl list as well. So there's I'll break them down when we get to the finalists, because there should only be 5 or 10 max in each category. But those are the guys that are up for the big prestigious position awards this year. And I think the 24th, they'll all get narrowed down. So they're all a step closer to walking away with a trophy on Heisman night.
I'm about to say, it's only a week away. I think, it might be our next show actually, is on the 24th.
Yeah,
so we might get to break some lists down fresh from the oven, so to say. So yeah, that was a little look there at the FCS. I think when their playoff program starts, we'll start covering that on here, because obviously, the regular season will have ended, so we can focus on the FCS and the FBS and give the FCS a little bit more love in there. But there's a lot to like. One question though, I think Madison been disqualified from going for that championship because they're leaving, or are they still allowed to go for it? I thought they'd been disqualified from going for it.
I'm pretty sure the conference they were leaving said they would try get a playoff or a postseason ban if they decided to step up and join the Sun Belt. Now, I don't know if that's been confirmed or not. They could. I've not seen anything on here, but I think currently they're going in as the number 2 seed. So we could see if they do get a ban, if they do complain, but that'd be really shitty, wouldn't it? That would be mean. Just you're that bitter that they're leaving that you decide they can't make it. But no, they are one of the best teams in the nation. So a playoffs without them just wouldn't be the same, because they're a front runner. And like I say, they've produced some great NFL talent. We've spoken to the safety, D'Angelo Amos, from there. He knows just how good the Dukes are. He started his career at James Madison.
Absolutely. And I think, when we do get some of these FCS playoff teams, we'll have to dive down through the player talent a bit, but I'm sure we'll find some at James Madison for sure. Like you say, they are known to produce good talent there. So at North Dakota State, got to go there, obviously. So, yeah, we'll start covering them a bit more in the weeks to come, and we'll see what we can unearth down there. But yeah, there's that, and then we will hopefully do the updated awards lists for you next week and break them down as well. Is there anything else you want to get off before we finish today? Because I think we're just about through everything now, if I remember rightly. I've written down about 20 pages of notes for today, so I may have missed something.
Same. I've been writing down notes. Like I say, I've clocked up a lot of paper the last few weeks. But no, I think right now, I think the games this week will decide the playoffs. I think this is the week where the playoffs will be decided. Oregon, it's a big game for them, and Ohio State. If anyone's going to make a claim like Michigan State, it's got to be this week. This is your last chance saloon. And this is the week as well. We're going to find out who's making championship games too. So we're going to be able to update next season because people are going to be booking places. So it's going to be a huge weekend.
And we should be able to start deciphering out the bowls as well. It's all getting very intriguing. We'll probably focus on the more important ones, as you say, because there's about 70 odd bowl games or something stupid. So it's rivalry week soon as well, isn't it? It's rivalry week last week. So we can have a preview of rivalry week as well. I think we might go through that next week. You love your rivalries, don't you?
Yep. Oklahoma State, Bedlam. Like I say, that's one of the best in the nation. We thought they'd both be unbeaten when they got there, but it's going to be a tasty one this year because, like I say, one of them's not doing well and one of them is, I'd say, exceeding expectations.
Yeah, I'm very surprised with Oklahoma State. I think when they lost that one a few weeks back, I thought that was it. We'd never see them again, but they slowly worked their way back up. They've not gone away. And I mean, they've put down 65 points at the weekend. And I think I sort of predicted that they might struggle, but they didn't. They handed out an absolute ass whooping. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a cracking game, that is. So, yeah, we've got a lot to look forward to. Rivalry week to look forward to. Awards to look forward to. Next week, as usual, probably going to be an absolutely jam-packed show. But let's say, is there anything else, or are we all good for this week now? All good?
No, I think that's it. I don't want to overfeed the people, the watchers. Like I say, that's a lot to digest.
Yeah, as always, if you have watched through us, it has been a long one, but we really do appreciate it. We do go on for a while, but we try to give as accurate as a picture as college football as we can. And now that we're moving into draft season, we will move back closer towards focusing on players the Lions are going to draft. 2 weeks, we'll probably be doing our final mock drafts for the year. When the regular season is done, we'll see how they compared to the mid-season ones. God, that doesn't seem 2 minutes ago. So lots to look forward to, lots to keep tuning in with us for. And as I say, if you have been watching, we really appreciate it. If I've not had a chance to chat with you this evening, if you have been there, I apologise. That is just the technical limitations I'm working with at the moment. I'll hopefully be back and sorted and doing these streams myself soon enough if I can get everything sorted. But yeah, again, we appreciate everything you do. If you've got any scouting requests, player requests, any questions in regards to college, you can find us on Twitter. You can find us all over. So just drop us a question. And as you know, if you've watched the show before, we like to go into detail and try and give you as best an answer as possible. So just in terms of the next episodes for the podcast coming up, for the main podcast, it was going to be tomorrow. Obviously, we usually do our Thursday podcasts, which will be tomorrow, the 18th of November. Spoiler, that might be changing to Friday this week just because of availability for the pod tomorrow. Steve's away at a ping pong tournament. I'm working. I think a couple of the other guys are busy as well. So it's either going to be Thursday or Friday. We're going to be doing a preview for the Cleveland Browns versus the Detroit Lions. Are we going to get our first win this week? Who knows? Oh, goddamn. I meant to say that at the start of the show. I was going to do a little celebration saying this is the first ever college podcast we've done, Ryan, when the Lions haven't lost. Woohoo!
I know, it's like,
it's a celebration. Yeah, raise a glass. It is a celebration. We did not lose this week. We just drew. We missed a field goal, which was absolutely atrocious, but we will speak of it no more. We will banish it to the depths of hell where it belongs, but we're getting closer. So hopefully one of these days we can come on after we've won. So yeah, that's the main podcast, either tomorrow or Friday. Just keep an eye out for information regarding that. And then next week, you'll hear from us again on Wednesday, the 24th of November. Like I say, we're probably going to go through a lot that week. They've got rivalry week coming up. We're going to look at the games this weekend. So, we'll always have lots to chat about. So join us next week for that. The season is ending soon. So let's get in as much as we can while we're here. And then we'll be doing a preview for week 13 as well. Apart from that, it just remains me to thank Ryan. As always, always great to chat college football amongst the disappointment the Lions give us every week. It does give us a sense of optimism and something happy to talk about. You can find us on socials as always. Because I've not got my computer up at the minute, I'm not exactly sure what they are, but you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and what's the other one? Twitch, ROTL _UK, all in caps. On the Facebook, you can find us on our page, Roar of the Lions UK, or the Facebook group, Detroit Lions Fans One Pride Worldwide. And you can find us on our website as well, www.roarofthelions.uk.co.uk. There's not been so many articles going up recently because we've been really busy, but there will be some more content going up soon. Me and Ryan will be producing a lot of draft content on there, and there's a few guys we may be working with as well. So do keep an eye on that for us. But until next time, I just realised I forgot to ask Matt to come on the stream. Yeah. Oh, you're there. Yeah. Until next time, just remains to me to thank Ryan. Thank you to everyone who's listened. Really appreciate it. And we will see you next week for another episode of College Football. One Pride.
One Pride.